OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
All right, very welcome along. It is Thursday morning of Holy Week. We forgot yesterday was the day that Judas kissed Jesus and the betrayal happened.
Oh, where are you going with this?
I actually don't know. You can fill in the rest of that story yourselves out there if you want.
Yeah.
Nothing bad came of that anyway, did it?
No,
in the end, you know?
Not at all.
2,000 years of people killing each other in the name of righteousness. And that's why we have sport, folks. It's war without the bullets. I wonder, did George Orwell actually mean that, or was he actually taking the piss a little bit? Was there like a deep-seated sense of irony? He was like, here, I'm going to write this thing and everybody over here is going to lose their shit over it. Like, I think so. Or, you know.
Was it Jesus rose again on the Sunday, so allegedly, and Rory could rise again? Is that, we're trying to find a sporting link here? Win his next major?
Bernard Langer, when he won, was like, so he won his second one. I fell down a Bernard Langer YouTube wormhole yesterday as he talked about his personal relationship with Jesus. And basically, he won the Masters as a 27-year-old, and he was married to a beautiful woman, and the camera pans to his wife who's there beside him nodding. And I don't think she actually speaks in the 5 minutes that I watched, but it's like a piece to camera from 2001 where he's talking about how he met Jesus. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And so he was world number one golfer, 27, is a millionaire, and obviously he just won the Masters. And somebody invited him to Bible study, and I can't even remember. It was John 3:3. If there's anybody in the comments who's a good biblical scholar, I suspect there might not be at this hour of the morning, but if there is, and you can tell us what that Bible, something about knowing Jesus. Oh, it was like you must be born again, basically, was it? You're born once and then you must be born again into it. And this was the moment where the penny dropped for him, to the point where when he wins and he's in the butler cabin afterwards putting on the green jacket, he's breaking down in tears because it's Easter Sunday.
Jeez.
I remember, so this is obviously his second victory, which a Masters historian / somebody with Google in front of them might be able to tell us the year there quickly. Okay, Google, when did Bernard Langer win his second? Sometime in the 80s, right? Later. Was it the 90s? There's a big gap anyway. I just remember thinking, this is mad. Like, he genuinely felt like Jesus had guided him through. It's pretty good that you can call on your own personal Jesus to win golf tournaments.
Handy, as it turns out, yeah.
Not bad.
He won in 85 and 93.
So the 93, if you check back, he's totally emotional because it's Easter Sunday. And then he brought it up again. It's like, yeah, Easter Sunday. So I don't know. I think that there's like that Bible group in the Masters. They're the ones you want to put your money on this week because they all feel like they've been chosen. The Easter's got to do with the cycle of the moon, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Isn't everybody? Does everybody? Mm-hmm. Is there always a full moon on Easter? Is that what it is? I don't know.
No, I doubt it.
I stopped paying attention to all the rationale behind all this stuff a long time ago. And so, you know, if you, again, the Bible students / lunar experts.
They can't all be chosen, though. That's the thing. So there's.
Well, they all think they are.
Yeah,
that's
mad.
the bit.
They'll
and if you're not, it's like, you know, one of my buddies was, so it was close.
Yeah.
The Passover thing just passed over me and landed on them.
It's a lesson. It's a learning lesson if they don't win.
Mixing a few stories here together, unfortunately.
Yeah, Jesus.
Morning.
How are you, Colm? Colm's here. Shane is here. If you want to get in touch, you can leave a comment in the YouTube stream, but you've got to be signed in and you have to be subscribed to our channel, youtube.com/off the ball.
Is that the first time a Bible verse has been referenced?
First time
on the show.
I think
first
so.
time for sure.
You never know.
Come here. Last night was just a humble Wednesday, right? I think we can all agree on that.
Humble.
Seismic news. David Moyes on the brink at West Ham for the second time. Manchester United beat Brentford when Brentford showed far too much respect to United. Frank Lampard is going to come back for the second time as well. And all that aside, last night in the sporting world, football particularly, was a tale of two hat-tricks. One from Karim Benzema in El Clasico as Real Madrid hammered Barcelona. And two was to my left here. Shane Hannon, talk us through your hat-trick last night. And also, sorry, I need to put this in the headline because it will bury lead. Stripped of the captaincy, scored a hat-trick.
Oh, punish
Shane, please.
So yeah, why always me? I should have had a t-shirt, why always me, when I scored the third. Didn't. So the stripped of the captaincy thing was a misunderstanding. So I, as I usually do before the match, threw on the number 7 jersey, threw on the armband, got ready to lead the team out, and then I hear the manager, Deezer, called out, said, "Jimmy Traynor, you're the captain." So walking out, I'm pissed off. I'm like, there you go, there's the armband. And I said, I'm not going to say anything until after the match. I'm going to be a leader and not bring this up, not make an issue until after the match. Turns out after the match, the manager had forgotten that I was there and had forgotten that I was there to take the armband as I usually do. But as Michael Jordan said, I took that personally. And it led to an onslaught of goals in a 5-2 win in the Cup quarter-final.
Right, so he's going to do this again. If it worked once, Shane, it's going to work again.
Yeah. Well, I came home from Dublin yesterday and after work and visualised that I actually came in to the house to my brother and I said I was tired after a long day at work, driving up from Dublin, and I said, I'm either going to play crap, just before I went out to the match, I'm either going to play crap today or I'm going to score a hat-trick.
The lack of thinking time available to you, did it actually benefit you ultimately?
100%. My last hat-trick I spent the night before in the nightclub.
How many hat-tricks have you scored?
I've scored a few. Yeah.
I'm aware that there was actual sport last night that we'll get to, but I am interested. Your 3 goals. What kind of goals did you score there?
Diagonal run off the last defender, ball in behind. The first 2 were quite similar. Nice little finishes past the goalkeeper. Third one was one of my striking teammates, Paul Smith, who used to play in the League of Ireland to a decent degree. Took a shot, back out to me, took a touch and rifled past the keeper. Look, it's a team sport, lads. But I mean, I visualise it. Like Rory McIlroy visualising getting the green jacket off Scotty Scheffler in the butler's cabin. I visualised the hat-trick last night.
Very good.
Made it happen. So,
you're a big man, good touch, number 9?
Yeah, number 9. I was kind of playing on the wide off the front 3 last night,
right?
Which kind of works for me. You can almost teleport those little runs in behind. I watch the offside trap as well.
When I found out you played football to a good level, convinced you were a midfielder.
Really?
You've centre mid written all over you.
I've played centre mid before. I have played centre mid before.
The legs are going.
Having completed one hat-trick and seen the other, who did it better? Shane Hannon or Karim Benzema?
Benzema was playing Barcelona. I was playing
but the actual goals.
But the actual goals, mine obviously. Modesty is striker. You're not a striker if you're too modest.
If anyone out there has some sort of footage of any of these goals, I'd love to see it, because Shane has complete carte blanche to do what he wants here in the description of these goals.
Yeah,
he could be saying anything he wants. I would love to know which is better.
Should have said halfway line.
Who are we playing? Sorry, just to give them a shout out.
Killylaw, a good team as well. It was 2-2 with 6 minutes to play.
Oh, right.
So I scored the first 2 goals, 2-0 up. Then they got back to 2-1 for half time. We conceded then with 6 minutes left, 2-2. You're thinking this is going to extra time, but we managed to pull away.
Sounds like a good episode of Dream Team.
Good game.
Not great that your manager didn't spot you in the changing room beforehand.
Just didn't
unless
think about
he
it.
did,
Yeah.
it was like, I know what I'm going to do. He needs a bit of a boot up the hole. So
Well, it worked.
right, we do have a pair of tickets to give away to the Heineken Champions Cup quarter-final at the Aviva on Good Friday, which is obviously tomorrow. Leinster against Leicester. The best live comments will win 2 tickets. Now, you've got to be able to go to the game, and you have to be able to get in touch with us afterwards for us to be able to email you the tickets. So if you want to go to Leinster-Leicester tomorrow night in the Aviva, the best live comments as picked by Shane.
Yes.
You're going to have to be nice to me in the comments this morning because I'm picking it.
Something that basically makes Shane smile at least. Hopefully laugh.
Yeah.
Would be great.
Laugh would be fantastic.
And also make sure you're on Twitter and have your Twitter DMs open so that we can contact you. That's crucial.
Right, so you mentioned, I'm going to just go run through some of these headlines on the back pages of the tabloids. It does look like, West Ham were 2-0 down inside 15 minutes last night and ended up losing 5-1. They had a lot of chances themselves, but Newcastle absolutely destroyed them. Newcastle looking pretty good for the top 4, and maybe even they're going to finish ahead of Man United, even though Man United went and spent $250 million last summer. Who could have predicted that, Colm? Who could have predicted that? Oh, sorry, I did.
We were there about a month ago and it didn't look like it was happening, but please proceed with the headlines.
I didn't think it would happen after they
hasn't happened yet.
In Casemiro and Anthony and who else did they sign? Lisandro Martinez. Bluest the colour. Luis Enrique. Enrique wants the Chelsea job. I mean, you know, I wish we could quote Junior Soprano without having to beep it out. But anyway, blue is the colour. Enrique wants the Chelsea job, and it's a picture of Lamps. Lamps gets caretaker role.
Tiny picture of Lamps. Bad for the ego.
Big picture of Lamps on the back of the mirror. Frank Job. Sacked, but now he's back. Legend Lampard set for Blues hot seat at Easter. He is truly the Jesus Christ in this analogy.
He is risen from the dead.
How many Jesuses can we find in sports today? Lampard is back at the bridge, and then it's Rashford and Sancho. Sancho, not quite there.
No, not last night.
Sancho is more like one of the four. Who are the ones who write the Gospels?
I thought you were going to say the four wise men, and I was going to.
What are the apostles who wrote the
four
Gospels?
Well,
there's a
Matthew,
name
Mark,
for them
Luke,
too.
and John.
I know the names, but there's a thing that there's a collective noun for gospel writers who were also apostles.
My religious knowledge has deserted me.
We're chiseling off the plaque of 40 years of heathenism. Sorry, Lampard is back at the bridge. I can't understand this. Look, Blue's back is the back of the star, and there's also a massive
He is
picture.
laughing.
Well,
All the way to the bank, he's laughing.
Are they going to give him some kind of role in the hierarchy? Is it like a club ambassadorial role? So he's now part of them forever, and he's coming back, and he's.
What's in this for Lamps? Because best case scenario, they win the Champions League, just like Roberto Di Matteo did 11 years ago, and maybe they finish about 6th, right? What happens then? Because he will ultimately be replaced by a permanent manager, which increasingly, could be Luis Enrique, according to reports yesterday lunchtime, which would be an exciting appointment. He's not going to get the job full time again, surely. It's only 2 years. It's only 3 managers ago he was the manager.
It'd be a Solskjaer job then, wouldn't it?
So,
Here's the caretaker job,
what's
you do
Lampard's
well
goal?
and you keep it.
You say straight to the bank, right? Look, maybe Lampard is, financially motivated here. Maybe it's a very, very attractive looking package he's been given here. But he strikes me as a guy who doesn't really need it, doesn't really strive it.
I mean,
so what does he want after
He
this?
doesn't need the money.
Where's he going after that? Is it West Ham? Like, West Ham fans aren't the biggest fans of Frank Lampard.
They get over that pretty quickly, I think.
Does he go there?
So
Leicester?
Just tease it out. You've given him a victory in the Champions League.
Yeah. This is best case scenario, of course.
Okay, but
What happens then?
Well, what happens then is a Champions League winning manager, and it's on his CV, and he can do whatever he wants.
Well, Roberto Di Matteo got the Chelsea job permanently.
Yeah, but
when that happened.
Roberto Di Matteo was a lesser standing in world football than Frank Lampard, who has much bigger name recognition by virtue of the fact that he played for England 80 odd times. Like, Roberto Di Matteo never really made it beyond that brief stint, and was clearly a caretaker manager, and was like, they couldn't wait to get him out the door. With Lampard, he's obviously a club legend. So they're not going to win the Champions League. I don't think they're going to win the Champions League.
It's Real Madrid next.
I think they're going to get knocked out at that stage. I don't think Frank Lampard's a particularly good manager at the moment. But from his perspective, all of a sudden he's relevant again in world football, and this gets him into the conversation for the England job. Say he was to take a job in the back room at Chelsea in some kind of academy role. He's positioned to get the under-21 gig, which Lee Carsley is apparently going to give up, or is talking about giving up, and there's a possibility he might give up after the Euros. And then he gets that job, and he's an actual successor. If he can just re-establish that he's able to manage at this level in a short period of time, it's a massive shot in the arm for a career that looked like it had completely run its course as a manager.
I don't think the ego would allow him to go behind the scenes. I'd be sceptical if he took a step down.
But you go behind the scenes the way Southgate did, and you learn your trade at the under-21s.
John Terry's doing that at the
You
moment.
see, the thing with the difference between Lampard and Southgate is Southgate was, a fine defender, like really well respected for Aston Villa and Crystal Palace and Middlesbrough. Did a great job, but no Frank Lampard in terms of his impact on global football. So you're taking this guy who's so used to the status that he has ever since Harry Redknapp defended him in that press conference at West Ham in the 90s, and skyrocketed in terms of status and fame.
And how did his managerial career go?
But like, what's his echo chamber like? Like, who's he surrounded by? People probably telling him he was hard done by. When he was Chelsea manager, he probably argued that he assembled the squad that won the Champions League in 2021 under Thomas Tuchel. He probably feels that he had a tough gig. At Everton, he himself said he was battling all sorts of stuff on and off the field. He probably feels like, look back what I did with Derby, got to the playoff final, I did well there. So is he going to go from once again Chelsea manager to going to the coaching staff at Chelsea?
No, I'm not talking about the coaching staff. I'm talking about like a head of academy or head of underage.
It's just not public facing enough.
Well, but with the aim of getting the same role within the England setup, and maybe he just goes. Maybe there is no need because that the times coalesce perfectly. So you take Chelsea over, stabilise the ship, stop. Maybe get them scoring some goals, and then all of a sudden in the summertime the England under-21 job is available, and I think this is a massive shot in the arm with almost no risk.
I think it's great for Lampard, and not sure if it makes too much sense for Chelsea. Like, he knows the club started with a totally different regime. Like, as Thomas Tuchel said, he doesn't recognise the club that he left with new owners. And Bruno Sutter did well, unless he really doesn't want the job. Lampard, I don't know how much of a positive difference he's going to make at this stage. He's probably still very scorned over the Everton situation. He only left in January. Look, I'm looking at Di Matteo here, his managerial record. Like, he managed 2 clubs before Chelsea, way down the ranks, like MK Dons first, West Brom for 2 years.
Experience.
Then he got the Chelsea gig. But as soon as he won the Champions League, he got the gig permanently, and he was gone then in autumn. And who did he manage after that? Schalke and Aston Villa. That's what I'm saying. So he went from Chelsea, Champions League, to Schalke, to Aston Villa, when Villa weren't in a very great state at all. And I'm just trying to envision this time next year, who is Frank Lampard managing? I don't know what this. It's a very odd career path. I've never seen this happen before, where a manager is so quickly reappointed after being sacked. The exception probably being David Moyes.
Yeah,
when he left West Ham and came back again.
If you look at Chelsea's remaining fixtures, this is where it gets difficult for Lampard. They still have to play Manchester United, Brentford, Arsenal, Man City, Newcastle. Their last 2 games in the league are Man City away and Chelsea and Newcastle at home. So like, it could go badly for Lampard, but it can't be any worse than it was under Potter recently. So surely there'll be that new manager bounce, and he'll be the saviour and all the rest. I don't know. I think it's a good move for Lampard. As you say, he wants to be back in the. If you're not talking about him, he's not going to get other jobs. So he's back in the headlines.
What's the downside? I mean, the downside is that obviously it is a complete shambles, and there is interference in team selection. But he obviously is there for such a short period of time that he can probably tell them all to butt out. I do think it has the possibility of restoring him to conversations about any of the vacant positions that are out there, which doesn't exist at the moment. Nobody's thinking Frank Lampard would be great for any of the available club jobs. I haven't seen anybody link Lampard with Leicester, for example.
No.
That's what I say. Well, Crystal Palace is another option in the summer, when Roy Hodgson's own interim stint will finish, unless he decides to stay on or they offer it to him. But he was in contention for the Palace job before he took Everton, and he could go there. Run the Blaze.
Is he a good manager, though?
Mobile.
I don't think he...
I don't think there's been enough sample size to show. He's had short stints all 3 times.
I think the sample size is ample. I think the bit where Thomas Tuchel comes in and immediately fixes all the problems they had. The defence was shocking when Lampard was there. He was blaming individual errors as opposed to having a system in place to stop the team conceding goals. Tuchel walks in, draws the first couple of games 0-0, and all of a sudden everybody knows what their job is.
I think that's an unfair comparison between Tuchel and Lampard.
Well, it literally isn't an unfair comparison, because they were both the Chelsea managers with exactly the same squad. You're going to say, Tuchel's far more experienced, but the ball game is to be the best manager available. And if you're any team who is trying to sign a manager, you're looking around, you're going, who is the next Tuchel? How do I find somebody who's going to rise to that level, as opposed to Lampard, who just blamed everybody instead of actually taking responsibility himself.
I'm not the biggest Frank Lampard fan as a manager. I'm unconvinced, but I'm also not totally convinced that he's a terrible manager yet. I haven't seen it. Like, he did, I'll give him one thing. He did well at Derby. He did well, and that's a while ago, but it is forgotten. And he kept everything up last year when they looked doomed this time last year. We were talking about them as going down, and he kept them up. Now, people out there or anywhere will say, well, he got them into the position too, or he certainly continued the decline when he took over at Everton. But he did ultimately keep them up. And at Chelsea, he did all right for a while. He did okay.
See, what Lampard's going to do is point out that things didn't get worse. So they're currently 11th on 39 points. But Palace behind them are 9 points off. So they're not going to finish any lower than they currently are.
Yeah.
So he's going to say, well, I kept them 11th, or I took them up a place. It's not going to get any worse.
It's handy for him. It's definitely handy. I'm just wondering, where does he go from here
England.
in the summer?
England.
I'm not so
Why
sure
not?
about that.
Why not?
Why would
big
he,
job, like?
Are you saying?
No,
Are you saying
21s?
Yeah. I don't think it's big enough for him.
But it's the England job. You get the England job after doing that. You're the number one contender. You're anointed as the natural successor. You go to whatever the tournaments are. You hang around like a bad smell. Whatever. Like the English FA have definitely looked to a point from within. They've realised the folly of their ways, appointing whatever the most famous celebrity / voguish choice was, and it looks like they're a relatively well-run organisation at the moment. Maybe that's just a complete facade because Southgate is such a good handler of all of those scenarios and those situations. Like, I don't know. What's wrong with that?
Well, Southgate's going to go probably after next Euros. He's been there quite a while. So say if he does go, and he had the option of Frank Lampard after a year with the 21s, or an available Graham Potter, for example.
Eddie Howe.
Or Eddie Howe. You're taking the latter two there, aren't you? Like, what's Lampard going to do with 21s that's going to impress the hierarchy in England so much, other than availability at the right time?
Well, that's first off, and secondly is that we've sent you on a lot of training courses, and we've analysed your preparation, and you've evolved as a manager, and you've been You've got to understand the cut and thrust or the ebb and flow rather, as opposed to cut and thrust of only seeing the squad whenever you see them. And also, you're one of our former legends. There's pictures of you all around this place.
Yeah, that's the one. I think that's the one thing going for England is that he'll be able to gather the players and say, "Look, I was great, and I think you're great," and that might help the part-time-ish nature of international football versus club football.
I don't think there's any whatever about the small sample size. There's no body of evidence that Graham Potter is the right man for that job at all.
No. This thing about the club legends sneaking into jobs without that much experience. Like, I was watching John Terry on with Stephen Hendry on his YouTube channel there recently, and Terry was saying, like, even at Villa, and Craig Shakespeare is such a better coach. He was like, Craig Shakespeare was such a better coach than me. That he was like, I just want to be a manager now, I don't want to be a coach. These lads just skip into jobs. Like, Lampard shouldn't have been at Chelsea when he was the first stint. They seem to skip the pecking order, which is fair enough because of their stature, but it's a bit unfair.
It is unfair, but I wouldn't blame Lampard for that. It's not his fault.
No,
he was a brilliant player and he did extraordinary things in his career, and it's not his fault that club owners make strange decisions. So I think fair play to him for taking the opportunity. And I'd say the temptation to turn down the Chelsea job was probably in his mind, because he probably did feel it's too early for me. He still took it. Like, it's still a brave decision to make. Like, I understand. Like, I understand why Lampard is not rated as a manager. I get it. Like, you look at the three clubs straight away, and you say, look, he could have done more at each of them. I think I'm looking at the positive side. I think he did okay at least at all three at some point. So I don't think he's a complete disaster or write-off.
Okay, well then in which case he's absolutely the right candidate for the England job, and it'll be a good spectacle. I think we could all get behind Frank Lampard. I could certainly get behind that as a...
I would absolutely enjoy. Also, sorry, David Moyes keeps on referring to last season and how well they did. They did extraordinarily well last season. He gets criticised for this, but West Ham finished 7th in the Premier League, and I completely forgot about this. They got to the semi-final of the Europa League.
Yeah.
He keeps on referencing last year, and people aren't happy with it. Yeah. He's set to be the next to go. He could be the 14th Premier League manager.
Should he be sacked? I don't know.
It tends to be 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning just after we come off air. So we're waiting with bated breath to find out the exact news. And sorry, JP Wright, voice actor, says, can we get some appreciation for Newcastle instead of constantly hearing about Monaghan? Best defence in the league, and the whole back five cost less than Van Dijk. Eddie Howe has worked wonders. Eddie Howe, excellent manager.
We do tend to focus on the negative. So, like, West Ham last night obviously being the story, but then you forget the Newcastle 5-1 win away from home, which is fair enough. A
routine, taking care of business. You know, it's a pressure game. All that travel, obviously.
See Callum Wilson's Macarena?
So difficult for them. He did it twice.
Oh, it was fantastic. He does the podcast with Mikel Antonio, the footballers podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And he told him on the podcast that he was going to do that if he scored. And he followed through in his word. And my word, did he piss off the West Ham fans behind the goal.
Tribute to Lee Sharp. Great to see.
Class.
Newcastle. It's the first time Newcastle have won 4 in a row for 11 years. They're flying it. Also, sorry, we have to mention Denise O'Sullivan's going to win her 100th cap this Saturday against the USA. What a player. One of Cork's finest. Much more contender.
Talked about it on yesterday's show. She's got there faster than Robbie Keane did, and obviously, as we said, Robbie was a teenage prodigy. It's a sensational performance, and Kathleen was pointing out that when she talks to people in America, they're like, this is a superstar. She's like absolutely world class, and probably because she plays in America instead of England, doesn't quite get the same level of kudos from the Ireland fans as Katie McCabe does. But if we're going to do anything in the World Cup, it'll be on the back of brilliant performances from Denise O'Sullivan and Katie McCabe. So, yeah.
But that's definitely something, the Aviva, that I've noticed. You see the Centurions kind of going around on the screen around the stadium, which is a really good idea by the FAI or Ireland Football or whatever they're called now. But yeah, certainly Denise O'Sullivan being added to that list, well deserved.
Right, it is 7:54 and I'm delighted to say Alan Quinlan is with us again this morning. Alan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. Good, thanks, Ger.
Back from France?
Back from France, yeah. We took the horse to France. It was great. It was a great trip. Yeah, we went to Nantes, La Rochelle, and Bordeaux, and in between we got to see La Rochelle and Gloucester on Saturday night. So Rog wasn't too happy with me. He thought I was bringing him bad luck with the nearly lost that against Gloucester. Gloucester were brilliant. La Rochelle not so good, I suppose, on the night. But yeah, it was a great trip. Ireland are going to be in Nantes for the second pool game against Tonga, and the first game is in Bordeaux against Romania. So come September, it should be fairly busy with Irish fans there.
Nantes is a class city. I don't know if anybody's ever been there before, but the cycle lanes are actually in the middle of the road. They prioritise the cyclists as opposed to, and it's and you're kind of a little bit scared on the bike, going, I'm in the middle of the road here, but the cars are like, yeah, no, that's fine. We appreciate the fact that you're there. We just showed the footage of you wandering onto the pitch at La Rochelle. Is there just like a, everybody recognises you, off you go, or did you have to get special dispensation?
No, we got some passes. Roger organised them. I was a bit sceptical about whether they'd actually be there in the first place, but he assured me on Friday that it was all sorted. So when I went to get the passes for the rest of the crew that were with us, there was just one there initially for me, and then the girl said it was her mistake. It was actually 5 there, so there was 5 of us on the trip, and we got looked after unbelievably well. The atmosphere there is just phenomenal. I couldn't believe the atmosphere. It was just, there were constant singing, chanting. And I decided, Roger said to me, come down and meet me before the game. And I kind of wandered down, and he was on the edge of the pitch, and I ended up meeting him. He was quite relaxed. So it was lovely. It was great to see that and see it from a French rugby point of view, the whole atmosphere, and what I suppose we've always talked about home advantage for French teams. And, I played there many times against French teams and right across France. And you can see what the culture is like and what it means to people in these smaller cities, if you like. The rugby at the weekend is everything. And the drum roll, the colour, all that kind of stuff was just phenomenal. So I was blown away by the atmosphere there. But La Rochelle didn't play too well, so he wasn't too happy. Donnacha Ryan was sitting beside him during the game. There was a coach's area, and he sat outside the box in a couple of seats right at the back. And it was a nervy game for them. They certainly need to be a lot better this week against Saracens.
It was really nervy. It was one of those performances, though, that sometimes at the end of the tournament you look back and you go, oh, that was the one where a team in a football tournament wins on a penalty shootout against a supposedly inferior side, because they're like, were they a little bit complacent? Maybe is that in a way that they won't be against Saracens, for example?
Possibly. Didn't protect the ball. A lot of loose passes, offloads, and I suppose maybe there was a bit of complacency. The expectation was, maybe I even had it, that this would be a strong win for La Rochelle. To be fair to Gloucester, they were brilliant, and they got opportunities in the game that kept them in it, and they kept probably getting confidence boosters that we're here, and we're playing well, and we're still in this game. And their work rate, enthusiasm, energy was phenomenal. So I've had those games. We've all had them, where you go to France or you go away in the Champions Cup and you're expected to win, or even at home when you get probably an underwhelming performance. And I think it's a good point you make, that sometimes those are ones that kind of define your season in a sense, that you win kind of ugly. You don't want to be disrespectful to Gloucester, because they were brilliant. Lewis Rees-Zammit, seeing him up close, the pace, he caused them all sorts of problems. But I think if La Rochelle look back in the game, they had lots of errors and loose passes and moments in the game where they just didn't execute, and poor kicking. A lot of stuff went on, and I felt, God, this is going to be one of these games, because in the back of everyone's minds, with the way the Champions Cup is kind of panned out, and similar to Leinster, La Rochelle will be, they had a path all the way to the final here. So you're thinking round 16, win that. You then have a home quarter, home semi. And we're all thinking La Rochelle, Leinster again in Dublin. But La Rochelle need to be a lot better, I think. They wouldn't have frightened anyone at the weekend. But it was really important. They just got to win, to be fair.
Roger's obviously a tracksuit manager as opposed to a suit and tie manager. Quinny, are you impressed up close and personal watching his demeanour, his prancing up and down the sideline? Is he vocal, or were you surprised by his style?
Yeah, I was surprised he was so calm, to be honest. I did look down at him a good bit as regards when Gloucester scored or when something went wrong. There was no real animation, or obviously he's had a few issues on the sideline with different coaches over the years, but I watched every time one of the La Rochelle players came off the field in that second half, and he was kind of like a Jurgen Klopp type, hug and pat in the back, and he was very calm. I'm not saying I'm surprised at all at that, because, but it was just, I felt the tension. The crowd were unbelievably tense. Donncha Ryan was kind of standing up and out of the seat a lot, with some of the stuff the mistakes they made. But no, he's very impressed. I tell you, I could believe it when we left the ground. The amount of people that are chasing him down for photos and patting him on the back and following him everywhere. So it took us a long time to get out of the ground on Saturday night, but they love him there, and they love, I suppose, Donncha Ryan as well. He's done a great job too. So they'll certainly need to be a lot better. But it was definitely eye-opening, Shane, to see the atmosphere and what it means to people. And I kind of knew that from playing there, but just to see it as a not working in any capacity, just being there as a spectator at the game, the atmosphere was incredible. Even when they were going poor, the crowd were going crazy, singing, chanting. Great atmosphere to play in.
Yeah, I can see why it might be a site of pilgrimage for a lot of Irish rugby fans and just Irish sports fans generally over the next couple of years. We just need to put the final word on Munster. Obviously, you've done a deep dive with Niamh on the Red 78 podcast this week, which everybody can get wherever they get their podcasts. Just search Red 78. Now that the dust has settled a bit, what's the level of disappointment that you feel about how Munster limped out of Europe last weekend?
I think it's not just out of Europe last weekend. I think it's the last 3 weeks have kind of put a damper on things, if you like. I think it started with the Scarlets conceding 42 points in that game. All good in the first half of that game in Cork in March. Then obviously losing to Glasgow, and at the weekend, then it was always going to be difficult for Munster going there with the power that the Sharks have, but I think they've conceded 130 points and 18 tries in 3 games, so that doesn't kind of give a good indication or picture of the way they've defended. I think there's been a run from November right up to that Scarlets game that was very positive. The way they were playing completely change view in what they were doing last season or previous seasons around the attack. They're scoring a lot of tries themselves. I think they scored 16 tries in those 3 games. So if you were kind of looking at it, you think, well, defend better, stop conceding tries and keep doing what you're doing in attack and things will be fine. But I think the reality, Ger, is, and everybody knows this, they're still short on a bit of power. And when you come to kind of the championship end of season stuff, you're going to come up against teams who have all their internationals back, a lot of quality, and it does make a difference if you have, if you're playing a team that has 7 or 8 kind of regular seasoned internationals, current internationals. Well, the quality kind of comes out, and if you look at that Sharks team, and maybe again their performance in against the Scarlets in Wales the week before, kind of hoodwinked people a little bit and said, well, they're playing poor and how interested are they and how cohesive are they and all that stuff. But they're back at home in 28, 29 degrees heat, and they flex their muscles. So it's very disappointing for Munster. It's not a surprise that they lost, I think, but some of the facets of the game are still disappointing. And, the breakdown was a big issue. And a lot of that came down to, I think it wasn't all just solely they were overpowered. I think they were off it. They had probably, if you marked them players out of 10, the Munster players, you had probably 5, 6 out of 10 performances where you need 8, 9 out of 10 to go away from home and win those type of games.
Okay, let's preview Leinster. How do Leicester go about stopping Leinster? Is there anything that they've seen from Ulster last weekend? Is there anything that they've seen recently, even at international level, when these players are playing for Ireland, that Leicester can cling to and try and use as a means of getting into the game and then keeping the game alive? You still there, Alan? No, he's gone. We'll get him back in a second. Obviously, the Leicester game. If you want tickets to to the game. We have a pair to give away. Check out LeinsterRugby.ie for tickets to purchase tickets. We've got a pair of tickets to give away to the best comment on the show this morning. I don't know how you're leaning so far.
Well, people being nice to me, that'll get you everywhere, do you know? Absolutely everywhere when it comes to this. So I see a few people already trying that ploy, and let me just tell you, you're onto the right road. So yeah, certainly keep going that way. I know they're closing the top tier for the game, which is probably makes sense. It was a 6-day turnaround from the last game. It probably didn't have much notice for people. It's Easter weekend, but still should be a decent atmosphere.
Yeah. Alan, you're back.
I am, Ger. Sorry, earphones went on me there for some reason. I don't know why.
No worries. I was just asking, what did Leicester do to try and get into this game?
Yeah, I don't know. Is there anything they can do as regards stopping Leinster? Well, it's very difficult to stop them. You've got to be on it for the full 80 minutes as regards your kind of work rate, intensity, all that kind of stuff. The most obvious ones, and lots of people will kind of cling on to this one, is slow Leinster down and physically get amongst them and try and stop their flow, because the tempo and the pace that they play with can just blow teams away. But we saw in the rain last week against Ulster, their kicking game was superb, and not just the number of kicks they had, but the type of kicks, you know, the contestables, the territorial advantage they had in that game. So they seem to be a team that, and this isn't a surprise, that can play in conditions like that as well. They can play direct, they can have their expensive style to the game. For Leicester, it's about physicality as well. You know, set piece, maybe they might see some opportunity to go after Leinster in that scrum, force a few penalties, but they have to be on it for 80 minutes, and I just don't see it. I think James Cronin, Dan Cole and Montoya in the front row, that's an area maybe that they might see themselves having a little bit of an edge or an opportunity to go after Leinster. But when you have the Irish front row, essentially, it's probably me being disrespectful, and I'm not trying to be, but that's a good Leicester front row. Their back row, you know, with Jasper Wiese, Rafael and Liebenberg, I think they've got to really step up and play constant for 80 minutes. But it's just hard to see where they can stop Leinster, because they're just an unbelievably balanced quality side who look like they can just turn it on when they have to.
Leicester appear to have this reputation almost, Quinny, as this purely kicking team, which is maybe unfair, but certainly under Wigglesworth, that's the way in which they've gone. When you have someone like Pollard in your ranks, it helps as well, but you'd imagine away from home as well that will have some sort of an impact. We were just discussing there the fact that the top tier is going to be closed, but it'll still be a very much a home atmosphere for Leinster.
Yeah, it will, and it's not unfair to say that they have this reputation of kicking, because that's what they do. Van Poortvliet, the number 9, kicks a lot for England. I think in their game against Edinburgh on Friday night, again, you know, they play a couple of phases and it slows down and it's box kick. You know, Leinster kicked a fair bit on Saturday, but it's the contestable kicks, winning it back and gaining territory from that are really important. If Leicester do that well, and if you kick well in a game, and sometimes you criticise teams kicking too much in games, but if you kick well, the stats show that you win games. So I think Richard Wigglesworth will still want Van Poortvliet to kick a fair bit, but you know, if I was playing Leinster, if I was preparing for this game and playing Leinster, I think, and you were trying to do something different, it would be try and attack, try and play with a bit of abandonment, if you like, on occasions. It'll be a similar approach to what we saw from England. There's going to be aggression, intensity, pressure, line speed in defence. Will it be enough? I don't know. They've got to get a start early in the game, but I can't help but going back to that quarter-final last year over in Leicester, when Leinster just started the game so well. They blew Leicester away. I know Leicester came back a bit in that second half, but there's a gulf on paper here in the quality, and for Leicester, like I say, it's kind of stating the obvious. They've got to play for 80 minutes and really have bring a game plan and an intensity that that shocks Leinster, which I don't see happening.
Scott Penny straight in at 7 if Van der Fleer is out, which we expect.
I would imagine it depends what way Will Connors has been in training and stuff like that, because obviously Will Connors was a couple of years ago was after jumping ahead of even Josh Van der Fleer even, and he's a quality player. It just depends what kind of training he's been doing and how he's been impressing the Leinster coaches. But I would think that Scott Penny, what a player to have to come into the side. He's a brilliant player, so much power. Every time he scores, he comes and plays, he scores tries. Very physical player. Very lucky to have that kind of quality backup, aren't they? Someone like Scott Penny, for me, you would think, he signed a new contract recently for another couple of years. He's happy and comfortable to stay, and I think he's only started 5 games this year. So it's obviously down to the culture and the team that he's playing with and the club that he's with, which is top quality and one of the best, and probably not the best, if not the best in Europe. But what a player to have the ability to come in. I think it looks like it will be Scott Penny, unless something different is happening behind the scenes with Will Connors, and they fancy him for Friday night.
I think in a lot of people's minds, Quinny, we're hurtling towards a Leinster-La Rochelle final. I know that's the hope of Leinster fans, maybe, to get that element of revenge from last year. Having watched Leinster recently and having seen La Rochelle in person last weekend, are you leaning towards that being the likely outcome?
You have to be careful for what you wish for sometimes, Shane, because if you looked at La Rochelle last weekend as a Leinster fan, you would say, God, yeah, we're way better than this, and our quality and our team, and maybe we want revenge. But it depends. I think on what we saw last Saturday, La Rochelle need to be a lot better. I think they were the week before away to Bordeaux were very good, and maybe they got a little bit complacent, and maybe it's a mentality thing. We'll see and know this weekend, because Saracens will fancy a crack at La Rochelle in their ground on at the weekend on Sunday. So with the home advantage, you think if La Rochelle get through on Sunday, then they're home in the semi-finals. They play Stormers or Exeter on the other side. You would think so. It'd be a perfect final, wouldn't it? It would create some incredible colour. I think La Rochelle fans would travel in their droves as well to Dublin, but it's just so hard. The only ones that can trip Leinster up at this stage, I would think, is themselves. And again, I don't see that happening. I think they're pretty grounded, full of confidence, full of belief. And, you've Gary Ringrose back this weekend, Caelan Doris. They're not bad players to come back into a side, are they? No. It's
one last one for you, Quinny. One last one for you. James Lowe's in the papers today talking about his diet on match day. Pancake and smoothie for breakfast, steak sandwich or pasta for lunch, and then snacking the rest of the day to give himself the energy. What was your match day back in the day?
Depends what time it was. If they were the early kickoffs, the 1 o'clock ones, I hated those ones, or the 12:30 ones in France. Sometimes you're kind of scrambling to kind of even drag yourself out of the bed and have any sort of appetite, a bit of cereal, and then you're back for a pre-match meal at 9:30, 9:45. You're trying to eat chicken and pasta that hour of the day. So those ones are tricky. The evening games are much easier because you get up, have breakfast, have a little bit of lunch, and then that pre-match meal would have been 3:30, 4 o'clock with pasta and chicken. So I would have always tried to traditionally eat a bit of pasta and load up on the carbs, really. I like the idea of the steak sandwich, but I'm not sure if I would have had it on the day. But you can't beat a good old steak sandwich, can you? But
maybe the steak with no bread. Yeah,
it's all about carbs, really. The type of energy, from what I can remember of when I played, load up on the carbs. Leicester will need plenty of carbs for Friday night, but who knows? They might have a go. I tell you, I heard Visa, the South African number 8. He's just a handful, and if they can get their forwards kind of rumbling a little bit, maybe that's where they possibly will fancy causing Leinster some problems up front, scrum, line out, mauls, and in those contact areas. But it's hard to see beyond Leinster, isn't it?
All right, Quinny, we'll leave it there. Good stuff. Thanks a million.
Cheers, lads. Thanks.
Alan Quinlan there. As I said, you can get the deep dive on Munster's performance in the Heineken Champions Cup with Quinny and Niamh Briggs on the Red 78 podcast. After the ad break, Tommy Walsh is going to preview Kilkenny versus Limerick. You're going to hear a clip in the break from the latest episode of the Hurling Pod where James Scahill, Paul Murphy and Will are talking about the dark arts of the game. No better trio. The Hurling Pod is with Bord Gosh Energy, proud sponsors of the Senior Hurling Championship and the Legends Tour Series taking place in Croke Park. Back after this.
OTB AM.
The Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball.
From here we go. Next game is Arsenal now.
With the Gunners so close to ending their almost 2-decade wait for the Premier League title.
One of the best you'll see this season.
Liverpool are desperate for points as they try and salvage their season by qualifying for the Champions League.
Darwin Núñez, he snaps it all for Liverpool.
We know how close Manchester City will be to Arsenal before that, as at 2 o'clock Richie McCormick and Brian Kerr are in the gantry for their match at Southampton.
Sensational finish.
Live and exclusive Premier League football this Sunday on Off the Ball from 1 o'clock.
And it's a goal for Arsenal.
I have very wild dreams.
Lads who are part of the dark arts, like the dark arts now would be very much pulling at a lad's jersey. Like you saw Mikey Breen there and Stephen Bennett there a few weeks ago and he kind of stepping on his ankles and stuff. But like you can't throw a ball at the hurl now. Like you'll be banned for games if you do that. So it's very hard, to quote tonight, very hard to be a bastard in the modern game. Ask Gail about it there, he knows.
Go on, Scal. Talk about bastardry.
I don't know anything about bastardry.
Yeah, you actually speaking of it, because I saw that question, you sent it in earlier. Irwin was mentioned as one. That's not to say, that's not me quoting, that's Bo Lawler. Scal took a yellow card for Irwin against us a few years ago, All-Ireland final 2012. Tanyan struck Richie Power with the hurl and you got booked. I remember that. Do you remember you got booked?
Red helmets. No, I went over.
You were wearing a white jersey. He was wearing a maroon.
Were you in the row scale? Is this what happened?
What happened was
Power scored a goal himself.
Larkin came through. Larkin was coming through, and he took a shot. And then I saved it. And Power got the rebound. Is that right?
Power got the rebound. Yeah. Himself and Tanyan jostled, and Tanyan hit with the hurl.
Yeah.
And you got booked.
I don't think he got him very good. But then Power went down, and I went over just to help him up.
Oh, yeah.
And the ref didn't like the way I helped him up. So, I don't know.
Leinster versus Leicester Tigers in the Heineken Champions Cup quarter-final. Kickoff is at 8 p.m. this Friday, 7th of April, in the Aviva Stadium. Join the Sea of Blue this weekend. Tickets on sale now at leinsterrugby.ie. Terms and conditions apply.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
For our radio listeners, we managed to cut to a picture there of Scahill dragging Richie Power up by the jersey. That's what he might have got booked for, and it might not have been a case of mistaken identity. Tommy Walsh, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Ger. How are you?
The dark arts. You were never involved in any of that stuff.
Well, I used to call them the dark arts. I just call them the arts, Ger. Sure. Yeah, listen, it was a different game back then. Like it was all about slowing down before maybe that second or two before the ball came in. And if you were trying to do that to him, then sure, listen, you might have had an advantage. But as Paul said, now like them days are gone because there's too many cameras around, and you're gone to the line. It's like soccer. You can't slide tackle in the Premier League anymore because, you know, if you're off that by that 1 second, VAR is in and you're probably off. And it's the same with hurling, but it was the culture that was grew up in. Like, you don't look to the referee for support. You look after yourself. And it's the same with a forward. Forward came in and as Paul was saying, you know, hit you a shot there just to get to know you. You just took it and you got on with it. Like, and it was part of the game. You did it in the garden when you're home with your brothers and sisters and that. Like, so you expected no different than championship days. And they were enjoyable to the most part as well, Ger, because when you're getting into these battles with guys, it was like you expected out of him, he expected out of you, and no one got hurt. That's the main thing. Like, there was you weren't trying to hurt anybody or anything like that. It was just, you know, maybe could be anything really, but yeah, the arts, that's what I used to call them anyway.
The bit of shirt pulling that they're talking about in GAA, obviously, I think it wasn't invented by James McCartan, but he used to run out and he'd pull the defender's jersey behind him as he was going. He'd trip over and the referee would be like, "Oh, you've been fouled there as a corner forward." I remember Dermot Ling telling us one time about going for a high ball with you, and your hand was on his hurl the whole time until the very last second, and all of a sudden the ball was in your hand. I was like, the sleight of hand that none of us knew about, but Dermot was like, that was genius.
Yeah, well, it wasn't. Basically, the way I suppose most players play the game when the ball is in the sky, Jerry, is if you're on your own, the ball comes down, you catch it, 100% of the time. If there's somebody on you and they're in front of you, you don't catch it. It's usually because there was something in the way, whether that was his hurl, whether that was his hand or whatever. So you just had to kind of free the path so that the ball came straight into your hand. That's the way. Really, when it really boils down, if you look at anybody trying to catch a ball, whether they're a forward or a back, it's all about making sure that pathway for the ball is coming straight into your hand, because otherwise it hits their hurl, hits their hand straight down into the ground. But I wouldn't, that's a skill in the game. I'm not talking about hitting the person or striking their hurl or striking their hand. I'm just talking about positioning everything in a way that the ball comes straight into your hand instead of his, so you can call it the dark art if you want. I definitely wouldn't look at it like that, because if I was in front of my man and I went up to catch it and he shoved, my hurl, my hand out of the way so the ball went into his hand, I'd say fair play to him, and I'd say very silly out of me to put myself in that position,
Would you be talking to before throw-in when the forward is coming over and you're shaking hands? Would you be talking throughout the match, whispering to him, saying things in his ear, getting in his head, or is that not a done thing?
Yeah, that was never a done thing done in hurling, to answer. It's too fast, because if you're saying that to your man and suddenly it's all he has to do is get the ball and put in the back of the net, and suddenly you're the fool. So I always found it too high risk. Plus you knew the guys. There was only 5 or 6 Kilkenny, say Tipperary, Cork, Galway, Limerick. There's only so many teams at the top anyway, so you knew them all pretty well. And I never saw an advantage to it anyway, because a forward could just go past you. You could be marking him, as Christy Ring used to say, as a forward, you could be out of the game for 55 minutes, in a 60-minute game back then. You could be out of the game for 55 minutes. You only have to hurl well for 5 minutes. And you're the hero. Towards the defender then is, in big trouble. He scored 3 goals. I think he was on Donald Broderick for Limerick in, say it was a Munster final many moons ago, and Christie was out of the game for the whole game. Next minute scored 3 goals and Cork beat Limerick. So I never saw an advantage to talking to someone, Shane. It's just, and it wasn't the done thing too. You're geared by your environment as well. You're probably brought up to respect your opponent, and it was all kind of, if everybody gives everything to win the game, and you forget about it then once the game is over. So if there's words spoken, it's very hard to totally forget about then after the game, isn't it? Now, the usual stuff probably happened from time to time with certain players that you wouldn't hold it against them. They might be saying this, and Brian Cody's looking at you there, you could be coming off there in the next few minutes, or that kind of it's harmless enough out talk, but there was never anything that you would hear of that went on in other sports. There really wasn't, Shane. And I definitely think you used to have All-Star tours back then. You used to have Railway Cups. The Railway Cups were magical as a player, probably not as a spectator, because not everybody is playing. They're in the depths of the winter. But you really got to know players, especially in Leinster, you got to know the Offaly lads, the Wexford lads. And it was great for camaraderie, because when you're playing with each other in a Railway Cup, you were on the same team. Towards after a game, if it's Kilkenny versus Wexford, Kilkenny versus Offaly, if you win, you don't want to kind of rub it in the person's face. And if you lose, you're in no mood to talk to anyone, Shane. So I think that them kind of competitions and the All-Star tours and things like that, I think they cut out a lot of that as well, because you knew the guys,
Before we get to the league final, I did want to just ask your opinion on a conversation that's been had over the last week or so about just how enjoyable the game is at the moment, with the frequency of scoring and the high scores. Where do you stand on the quality of the game generally that we're watching at the moment? Yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with the quality, Ger. I think it's the excitement people are referring to. So before, say when the scores were averaging maybe 111 to 115, them kind of scores would have been very, very common, say probably 15, 20 years ago. But you had so many different exciting parts of the game other than the score. So say if the ball came into the full back line and Brian Lohan or
Noel Hickey, or we'll say Kevin Keenan from Offaly, The Rock from Cork. These guys come out with a ball. The whole crowd is on their feet if they see him out in front. Next minute they collect it. They might, shoulder lad and then drive it 100 yards down the line. The crowd are going wild as if it's a goal. Suddenly then if you forward on that play, it goes down and it could be a man-on-man battle inside. It could be, we'll say, Eddie Brennan versus Wayne Sherlock, or it could be Joe Dean versus Kevin Keenan, it could be Anton, and suddenly the crowd are on their feet again. What happens if the ball breaks a certain way? What if he catches it, the forward catches it, turns his man? Again, if there's a big catch, the crowd are on their feet again. So I think it's towards now, when you get the ball in the fence, you do a 5-yard stick pass. There's no buzz or excitement around that. When you get the ball in the forwards, generally, like you're kind of 1 versus 2 or 1 versus 3. No real excitement if the ball breaks a certain way because the spare man is picking it up. So I think the quality, there's no difference. The quality is probably higher than it ever was. Like, would you go ask me to take a puck out from 80,000 people? Well, that's, steamrolling down behind me in Crow Park. Very difficult thing to do it with their eyes shut at the moment. A stick pass from 30, 40 yards straight into a lad's hand. Like I'd say 50% of our ones would have been straight at a man's feet. Like, so I think there's no drop off, and there's probably definitely a higher skill level, absolutely, at the moment. I think the reference at the moment is the excitement of the game has definitely, changed.
And do you lament that? Do you miss that, or do you think that this is just part of more teams will get closer to each other, and we're in a cycle where there's one dominant team? And I think if you didn't have Limerick dominating, just take Limerick out over the last 4 or 5 years, anybody would have felt like they could win the All-Ireland, and we wouldn't have had too many of the one-sided games. Is that part of this conversation as well? Because it feels a little bit like we had this conversation when the Dubs were mechanically hoovering up All-Irelands. People changed the game, they changed the kick-out rule, everything was wrong, they got the forward mark, when actually that was just an all-time great team, and you didn't really need to change the rules.
Yeah, I suppose I tend not to look at the positive side of it, because it happened in football years ago and everybody was giving out about it. Did it help? I don't think it did. So there's no advantage to us coming on week complaining about the way it was and the way it should have been. I don't think it helps in any way towards encouraging people to play the game, to watch the game. I think there will be a natural evolution. Like I was looking at the styles that have happened over the last, let's say, 30 years, Ger. You go back to Clare, they brought in physical fitness in the mid-90s. That was probably never seen in hurling before, running up mountains. It wasn't their Clare players on behind trees, so they didn't have to do the chine in the next run. Missed the hill running. Huge. They brought this physical fitness. Next minute, Kilkenny came along. They brought, had to, I suppose, adapt and join with Clare and that. And they brought this spirit and intensity that forwards were working like never before. Never seen corner forwards. Their job was to score. Full forwards, their job is to score goals. Now they were running back to midfield, running back to half-back line, hooking and blocking. You had a Tipperary team then that beat, the Kilkenny team going for the 5 in a row. That Tipperary team was all about movement. Eamon O'Shea came in with his, different slant on the way he thought the game should be played. Next minute, you couldn't stay in your position. You're watching forwards, they're moving absolutely everywhere, and there were lads giving them the ball. Beforehand, when you got the ball in the backs, you just cleared as long as you could hit it. Now they were finding forwards in great positions. Suddenly, Tipperary scored goal after goal. You had the Cork running game. Like that Cork running game, I remember in 06, they're after winning 2 in a row. We were after sticking to our guns because, Brian Cody was so tough. He was so determined, so confident in his own ability to read the game. He said, no, we're doing it our way and we'll stay going. And, I'm sure at the time, Cork were like Tom and Jerry midfield, Tom Kenny, Jerry O'Connor, speed merchants. You couldn't catch them. They were soling up and down the field for 70 minutes. You had Ben O'Connor, you had Niall McCarthy scoring all these scores as a result of the running game. The run out from the back. And the question was then, should we go and change? Should you adapt? That maybe our time is finished with the way we play the game. But no, they stuck with it. And suddenly the running game was kind of gone. And then you had, in recent times, I suppose, Galway did a bit of movement after they scored. Say if Joe Canning was playing wing forward, he scored. he'd move on to the next position, which would be corner forward, and the whole Galway furling rotated around that way. And now, sure, as we see, Ger, we have the Limerick game, which has been so dominant for the last, since probably, I know they won it in 18, but their probably current game has probably only been as dominant since 2020, where it's stick passing everywhere. And the stick passing quality is just off the charts. And I think that's where a lot of other teams are failing, really, because they're not able to, they're trying to do the Limerick game, but just not able to do it as well. And, so I think there'll be a natural evolution of the game, and that's when it'll change. But you'd love to know what they want to come up with.
Well, I was going to say, I think the lesson from that, you've just given us a brilliant potted history lesson there. Nobody ever got to the top by copying what was already being done. Everybody had to do something slightly different and closer to their own identity based on their own resources, which leads me nicely to the final here about where Kilkenny are. Kilkenny seem to have managed to manage the transition from an all-time great to a disciple, and yet be slightly different. So it's not exactly just a continuation. Derek Ling seems to be his own man, and the team's, there's subtle enough changes, but are there enough changes, do you think, for us to say that actually you can say there's a difference between Kilkenny this year and last year?
Well, there's new players in there. You have Billy Drennan is in there. He's having a fantastic league campaign. He's an All-Ireland champion in handball. You have Ger O'Donnell is coming in and making great impacts off the bench. Scored a hat-trick against Tipperary in the Dillon challenge game there to raise funds. So, like, they are adding players to the panel to this. They have a few position switches, like Hugh Lawler seems to be being tried out around the half back line. Young Tommy Welch is tried out around the half back line. Parg has gone back inside. So there has been plenty of change, slight changes, as you said, Ger. So yeah, Kilkenny would be very confident, but I think it all binds down to the fact of the strength of this Limerick team. Their physical strength is such a huge asset to them. And we saw Tipperary the last day. They tried to take him on with just going at him through the physical side. And I don't think it's the way to go at this Limerick team. I think you have to go at them with movement and speed, because taking on guys that are 6'5", 6'7", like Limerick have 3 or 4 lads 6'5", and they probably have 8 or 9 lads 6'2", 6'3" and above. So I think taking them on with the physical game, there's only going to be one winner, and that's Limerick, because they'll be able to take the hits better than anybody else. When they go through the tackles, they'll go through more tackles than anybody else. That's just science. That's just the way it is. So I think you have to take them on with movement, and you have to take them on with speed. Speed is a huge thing. When you're strong, what do you want the opposition to do? Take you on with strength. What do you not want them to do? Take you on with speed. So with Kilkenny, you have, Owen Cody there, you have Billy Drennan, all these boys, absolutely fast as lightning. And I'm not just talking about their feet, their heads. Hurling is a class game. It's all about class. You could score 2 or 3 goals in the space of a minute if your head is switched on and if your feet are switched on. So I think taking on Limerick in this league final, I would not take them on just going, it's with the physical side of things. I take them on the other side, and you need to score goals. This Limerick team has been brilliant in recent times about not conceding goals. They need to take them on and score a few goals, and keep them, I suppose, short on the other side regards, keep them out of away from the goalkeeper.
Yeah, these two sides produced a classic in the All-Ireland final last year. The hope is that they'll produce a classic again, and we can start talking about an exciting match. What do you think is going to happen? Who's going to win?
Yeah, so I do think Limerick are going to win. I just think they're after keeping very fresh during the league. Although they're winning every match and winning comfortably enough in the end, they're leaving off, 3 or 4 of their big shots. I reckon they'll go with I reckon the two of them will go in nearly championship type teams this weekend. And I do think Limerick will win. But I'm excited to see where Kilkenny at now. As we said, they have a few position switches now. They're going to be able to take on maybe. I always see that Limerick half-hour line is Gerard Hegarty and Tom Morrissey, Keane Lynch. They're just stars, and they're just brilliant in every game. 2 out of the 3 of them are nearly man of the match in every single game. They're left with acres and acres of space, Ger. So I'd love to see the Kilkenny team cutting out, as in man-mark them guys, and see what happens then on the other side, because everybody has tried, and maybe the zonal thing against them, where they leave off Garrod when he goes out the field, they leave off Keane, they leave off Tom Morrissey. The result every time is one or two of them scoring 5 points, scoring 2, 3, scoring 7 points. So I'd love them to man mark the half forward line and the half back line, because although they're very strong on one side, the half back line of Hannon, Burns and Kyle Hayes, they're commonly coming up with probably 6 points plus, and that's probably not even just from frees. So I'd be man marking the half back line and the half forward line and seeing where that'll take you.
Well, we'll find out on Sunday. Good stuff, Tommy. Thanks a million for joining us. Great to have you back. Cheers.
Okay, bye-bye.
Tommy Welsh giving us some thoughts there on the weekend's hurling. It is 8:34 this morning. OTB AM is live every morning with Gillette Labs. Got the ultimate shave or your money back Neon Night Edition available now. We have a competition running for a pair of tickets to Leinster against Leicester. LeinsterRugby.ie for ticket details if you want to buy tickets to go to the game tomorrow. How are we getting on, Shane?
There's some nice ones in, Ger, I have to say. There's a short list. We're not picking the winner just yet, are we? We're just going to give us a few in the short list. People are really making me feel good this morning. Lads, is Shane Hannon the new Evan Ferguson, says Frank? Well, when I was Evan Ferguson's age 18, he was 6. I'm 12 years older than him, so not really. I can't be the new Evan Ferguson. Always had Shane pegged as a hard as nails and no nonsense centre back, says Fred. Beckham was world class and Park is a legend. Spectre. They're all saying the right things, I think. So keep those teams coming, and you can also comment on what's happening in the show today as well. I think I have my winner. I'm not going to say it yet, but there's still time for people to change my mind.
Neil Smith says, how are you lads? I was in South Korea for the pandemic and I'm in Bulgaria now studying medicine. OTB has played a part in keeping my head together in the morning over the year, so thank you. Thanks for getting in touch, Neil, and a happy Easter to you. I hope you're having the crack in Bulgaria. If there's anybody else out there all around the world, get in touch this morning. We'd love to hear from you. You can leave a comment on the YouTube stream, or you can WhatsApp us on 0879 180 180. Rooney will end up with a better post-playing career than Lamps in the end, I think, says Spectre. I feel the same. I think you're right. Somebody else pointed out that he wasn't that good at Derby. Lampard, Rory Larmer says, friend of the show, Lampard didn't do well at Derby. The team he had was outrageous. They had to go up. Mount, Tamori and Harry Wilson all on loan. I think that I don't think Lampard's career is finished. I definitely think that if he learns a little bit and stops blaming everybody around him and starts like building a team culture that has the desire to work with each other, then he could still end up being a good manager. But that's more likely to happen in the England setup, I would suspect, than with Chelsea. We'll see. It is 8:37. Time for us to turn our attention to Gaelic football, and almost unawares, it is an absolutely massive weekend of games. Whether or not the outcome of them is going to be absolutely massive, we'll have to wait and see. Mayo Roscommon is in McHale Park on Sunday. We have Leinster preliminary action, and these are all the provincial football championships. Wicklow back out again against Carlow. Longford against Offaly. Laois against Wexford. It's Tip and Waterford in Munster, and Clare versus Cork in Cusack Park in Ennis, which is not a gimme for Cork by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm delighted to say John Maughan is with us to talk to us about these games this weekend. John, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good, guys. Good. Yeah, from a beautiful sunny morning here in Castlebar. Nice to talk to you both.
What is the level of expectation when you're out in the streets and people are coming up to you talking about the game this weekend? What's everybody feeling about this?
A small little bit of trepidation, I'll be honest with you, because there's an interesting statistic that's floating around on social media and in various chats about Roscommon managing to beat Mayo in the first round of the championship after we've won the league on the last 4 occasions. So, Roscommon they've had a fantastic league, an incredible performance in the last game, albeit against a malfunctioning Donegal. I think they put up 21 points to 9 on that particular game. So they're coming in with huge confidence, and no better team than Roscommon to bring Mayo back down to earth. But at the same side, that victory over Galway last Sunday in Croke Park will have raised our expectations, and we're coming with a bit of momentum as well. But it's just kind of one of those games where you're just keeping your fingers crossed and let's hope that we get out of jail. If we were to benchmark it against the league performance, Mayo, I think that game was played in early March. We look very, very athletic and very strong, particularly in the opening half of that National League campaign. And we looked like we were complete control But I tell you, the way Roscommon finished in that particular game, they finished, I think the lead, Mayo's lead had stretched out to 7 or 8 points at one stage. And within 4 or 5 or 6 minutes, it was back down to a kick of a ball. And if you might recall, I think they had an opportunity at the very last minute of that game, the last attack, where Jim O'Connor spread himself to prevent maybe a last-minute winning goal for Roscommon. So I tell you, it's one of those games where you're just, I think Kevin McStay's management team will be glad it's over and get a 2-week break before they go on to Pearse Stadium, if they're lucky enough to do that.
As an intercounty manager, John, of many years, you can understand and appreciate the importance of a turnaround and maybe having more rest time before a big game like this than your opposition. It's probably understandable that Kevin McStay was looking for the league final last week to be pushed forward to Saturday from Sunday. Is that going to have an impact in this game? Roscommon kind of sitting there waiting, ready to go, whereas Mayo had to go out last weekend.
It hasn't the same impact as it would have had a number of years ago, because the conditioning of players is so professional now, and Kevin has an enormous backroom team that has that managed down to its nth degree. So I would imagine, certainly there was no celebrations last Sunday evening. Ordinarily there might be a bit of a party or a Monday club after you win a league title. Certainly on the couple of occasions that we've won one down here in Mayo, that appears to be the case. But no, I'd say Kevin was very anxious to get them into recovery mode immediately after the game last Sunday. And as I say, with the conditioning of the players, I know Mayo's conditioning and strength work that they've done, they started off very, very early in the campaign. And that's another little argument there. We're going through the front door. I've no doubt Kevin McStay will want to win a provincial championship, because I'm not convinced this Mayo team right now are quite ready to win an All-Ireland title, particularly when you benchmark them against the Dublin performance and the Dublin resources they have. I'm not quite sure that we're quite good enough yet. So I think Kevin will be anxious to win a provincial title, and I think he'll throw the kitchen sink in the next couple of weeks to try and get over the line. And obviously, we're Mayo lucky enough to beat Roscommon, and I'm suggesting to you it's not an absolute certainty, but if we are the big one, and it will be an even bigger game, as Galway and Pearse Stadium, and that could be a really, really tricky encounter if Mayo get there.
What are the doubts? What are causing you to have doubts about Mayo's ability to get over the line in the All-Ireland? Is it anything to do with how Galway played them last week and maybe showed a bit of a template for teams to play against this Mayo side?
Yeah, I think there's a certain element of that. I think Pádraig Joyce will have gone off to Portugal on Monday morning, lamenting the fact that they didn't put Mayo away. They had created those 4 goal chances. Our goalkeeper was man the match. He alluded to that in his post-match interview, apparently. That they certainly opened us up. They came down to the heart of a defence, and there was a little bit of a question mark about our new defensive setup. Are we strong enough and good enough, particularly when teams come at us with pace? Jimmer O'Connor, of course, is playing more or less as an out-and-out sweeper these days behind Conor Loftus. Of course, Conor is our new centre-half back. He had a brilliant league campaign and probably embellished his reputation a little bit even last Sunday. But nonetheless, I just felt Galway penetrated us quite easily. And when you consider that Shane Walsh is not quite at the tempo that he needs to be, he missed quite a few opportunities, 45s and one thing and another. Of course, Peter Cook had that last-minute goal chance. They were a bit sloppy. So I think Pádraig Joyce and Galway will appreciate and understand that they have a greater opportunity with a 3-week lead into Pearse Stadium to tidy up elements of the game that make a big difference to them. Damien Comer, not starting, not quite fit enough. Johnny Heaney going off injured early in that first half. Get those guys back up to tempo over the next couple of weeks, and I just think that Galway can improve by 6 or 7 points for a Pearse Stadium game against Mayo or Roscommon.
Just in terms of the specific approach that Galway took, they basically conceded the kickouts to Mayo and said, okay, Mayo, you're going to have to play through us if you're going to beat us. And that really seemed to have stuck Mayo in a bit of treacle.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and it's an interesting aspect of the modern game, the high press and what you do there. Yeah, that's certainly something that Pádraig and Cian O'Neill would have, and his backroom team would have come up with that very clear strategy. And it certainly has worked because everybody tries to beat the press. I mean, if we can go along, we have a goalkeeper that can certainly, take over the press on occasion. So again, I think Kevin and his team will be spending a bit of time on working on an alternative to that, so that when a team decides to give you the ball, can we still go long? Can we still take the They tried it on a couple of occasions here throughout the league, and a couple, particularly the home games, where they have gone along with great success. And look, it very much depends on your midfield and how dominant they are, and that's an element of a game. Matthew Irwin, in some games he's been brilliant against Donegal. He was superb. Matthew appeared to have returned to the great form that he displayed. There's maybe a talk there that maybe Jack Carney might give us a better option of maybe winning clean possession if we decide to go long or kick outs. Yeah, there's certainly food for thought on those lines. But Galway certainly, with the approach they took, to cause us problems for sure. And particularly when they open us up down the heart of a defence, he just created a bit of consternation. Could have had 2 or 3 goals, and that's certainly a concern. And this defensive structure, albeit new for Mayo, it certainly needs a little bit of tweaking if we are to go on and land the big one.
John, I know Donegal are having their troubles, and they were already relegated at the time, but Roscommon kicked 21 points against them in the last round of the league. 20 of those were from play. I think there was only 1 free in the game. And when you look at that Roscommon full forward line, I mean, it is dangerous. You've got Diarmuid Murtagh, Conor Cox, Ben O'Carroll, all free scoring throughout the league. How do you expect that Mayo full back line to cope with them? Because Coyne and Callan in particular were excellent against Galway, I thought, and have been in recent weeks. But how do you expect those battles to match up?
It's going to be a worry. I in particular, this Ben O'Carroll has certainly caught everyone's attention this year with his performance. He's been superb. We know about the 2 Murtaghs, Kieran and Diarmuid. Obviously, Conor Cox, a very formidable opponent, strong. We've a very inexperienced full back line. And, look at Jack Coyne is a fabulous footballer. I watched him playing and winning an intermediate title with Ballyhonus on a couple of occasions last year. He's a gem of a footballer. McBreen has been on the periphery of the Mayo team for the last couple of years, albeit injury just kept him back from being a permanent starter over the last couple of seasons. And Sam Callanan has just been superb as well. Notwithstanding, the 3 of them are quite inexperienced, and I would be a little bit concerned. And then again, it's all about the quality of ball that Roscommon can get into that full forward line. But certainly, it's our defensive setup is a little bit concerning. Nonetheless, those 3 guys on the Mayo full back line are all talented. They're quick. They're athletic. And I thought Sam Callanan in particular did a fantastic job on Shane Walsh. So he's come in with great confidence. Jack Coyne, very, very talented footballer. And McBreen down here has been the talk of Mayo football supporters, because everyone feels we've now found a full back that's athletic and strong and can get up and down the field. But I just watching these Mayo team and the transition from the new management from James Horns into Kevin McStay's, we're very, very athletic. I mean, that's the one thing. With terrific pace, and even down to our cornerbacks and our full back, every opportunity they get, they are gone. And we have this kind of rotating system that Diarmuid O'Connor will sit back and Conor Loftus will hold, and Stephen Cohen will hold the defensive setup. And they're just given, a green light to our full back line to attack at will. So I expect that the same way Sean Kelly did it for Galway last week, every opportunity he was going to get in that National League final, he was going to take the likes of Aidan O'Shea on a gallop 150 metres, which Aidan doesn't like, obviously, up and down the field. I expect that the Mayo full back line will try and do the same with that Roscommon full forward line. Put them on the back foot, put them chasing, make it uncomfortable for them, and just see how athletic and how fit they really, really are. I think that will be an approach that Mayo will take. But you mentioned it there, 21 points, 20 from play against Donegal, albeit a Donegal team that was in complete disarray at that time. But we all expected Donegal might have come out in that last National League game and put down a marker and a statement after losing a manager and of course, all that consternation that it creates. But you have to point a light on Roscommon, and not alone that performance, but throughout the league.
Very impressive. And it's all actually set up for the perfect ambush, and I can see why there'd be a little bit of trepidation on the streets in Mayo this week. I do want to ask you about Clare though, because this is a big opportunity for Clare against Cork at the weekend. We've been waiting for this Clare team to have a statement victory under Colm Collins. They've been a staple in Division 2 for such a long period of time, and they've had a little bit of heartbreak there, and they've had a little bit of heartbreak in the Championship. And this year, if they were to get into the Sam Maguire, they'd obviously have to do it through the Provincial Championship. There would be a game at home that no one would really want to go down to Ennis to play them. But it basically all rests on this game against Cork this weekend. And we don't really know what to make of Cork either. So this is definitely one of those where it could be a famous victory for Clare, or it could be the birth of a new Cork movement.
Yeah, I mean, Cork have created a small bit of confusion, particularly that performance against Louth, not taking anything away from Louth's league campaign, and they've been certainly a team that's on the rise and have, they've been fantastic under Mickey Hart. But Cork are just haven't got that consistency. Their performances are so fragmented. One week they look absolutely brilliant. You have them in your accumulator, and yes, they go and put out a brilliant victory and they look magical, and the next weekend you're expecting them to drive on. People were talking a number of weeks ago about Cork being the dark horses in this year's championship. I'm not convinced at all. They have some fantastic footballers, but collectively that cohesion is just not there. They have a great full forward line, and if they hit form, you say, yeah, they can blow some of the top 3 or 4 teams of the country away if they all click on the one day. But they just don't do that. I mean, Clare, for the first time in, I think, 8 years, have been relegated. Is this Colm Collins' last throw of the dice? They haven't beaten Cork, I think, in about 20 years. They've already played them twice in this year's McGrath Cup and the National League, and I'd say really underperformed. That big rallying force that you'd expect from Clare at home, you just begin to question it. But I feel if there's any day to do it, it's this weekend. There's something about them. There's a bit of I suppose, story circulating that Colm Collins might move on after, incredible 8 or 9 years in charge. They've been absolutely fantastic. I know they've been missing a couple of their big name players when they play Cork in the National League. I think their 2 first choice midfielders were missing on that occasion. So if Clare can get back and get a good crowd going, they can be formidable. Would I back them to win it? I probably wouldn't, just because the history is there and the talent in that particularly in that Cork attack is just so strong. And for me, I just can't see it happening. I'd love to see it happening. I obviously have been involved with Clare for 4 years back in the early 90s, and we had some wonderful days down in Cusack Park in National League and a couple of championship games. So I'd be keeping my fingers crossed. But with Brian Hurley and Sherlock and Sean Porter, who's a beautiful footballer, Chris Jones, big midfielder, E. Maguire, they just have a lot of talent right around the park, and I just think it might be a big struggle for Clare.
Okay, one last one for me. It's going to be Easter Sunday, and it's the first round of the Connacht Football Championship. Is there any possibility that some team gets their strength and conditioning perfect and the others kind of screw it up over the course of the next 8-12 weeks, and then we have a slightly unusual All-Ireland winner because of the change of system? Or does this actually benefit the Dubs and Kerry more than anybody else because of the strength and depth that they have?
I have to say, Dublin for me, when you consider Brian Howard, Paul Mannion, just a cameo appearance the last day, Jack McCaffrey, Merchant, they're playing within their comfort zone, Dublin. They to me, any team that beats Dublin will win the All-Ireland, I feel. Of course, Kerry have been very slow out of the blocks. They've been indifferent. They got exactly what they wanted out of the league. That's what Jack O'Connor said, get 6 points and survive, and that's exactly what they did. Can't see any big shocks. Louth have been superb throughout the National League. Yeah, Derry, you just begin to, there's a question mark over them. Could have been beaten by an awful lot more last weekend in Dublin. They appear not to be a real Croke Park team. Rory Gallagher hasn't got the strength and depth of the quality that he had when he was involved with Jim McGillis and Johnny Gall. Forgot to mention Longford and Offaly there. Longford relegated, Offaly, both of them Tanchin Cup performance, it would appear. That'll be an interesting game, could end in a draw. The ones that you'd be a little bit worried about, I was talking to Andy Moore, and I meet him in the gym here at Castlebar. I was just chatting to him after their performance, the last league game against Sligo, which they lost, and they're travelling. They're on the road this week to New York. They're always very, very tricky encounters. I remember being involved in New York on a couple of cases with Mayo and Roscommon. And by God, you'd lose a couple of kilos on the sideline in those games. Likewise with London and Sligo. Albeit, I just don't think London are as strong as they were a couple of years ago, similarly with New York. But I know both Tony McEntee and Andy Moran will be very, very relieved if they come away next Monday or Tuesday out of those two capital cities with victories. But I'd say they will sweat for them. There certainly will be occasions during those two games overseas where Tony McEntee with Sligo will be sweating a little bit, similarly with Andy in New York. But I expect both of them to prevail by the narrow margins.
John,
but look, it's wonderful. Look, we're looking forward to a great championship.
Great stuff. Great to have you with us. Thanks a million. Cheers.
God bless, boys. Take care now. Thank you.
John Maughan there. Speaking of overseas, Leo O'Brien says, I'm an Irishman living in Melbourne. I love the show. Listen to you guys every day. Keep up the great work and have a great Easter. Happy Easter to you, Leo, in Melbourne as well. And in Cape Town, tuning in late, says Barbalatza 83. I don't know if I got the pronunciation correct. Barbalatza.
Sounds all right.
Tuning in late. I have tickets for the Stormers versus Munster on Saturday week. Can't wait. Stand up and fight. Thanks for getting in touch. So we have Bulgaria, we have Melbourne, we have Cape Town so far this morning. Any advance on that? You can get us, leave a comment on the YouTube stream or tweet us at OffTheBallAM. We are going to pick a winner for the Leinster tickets giveaway after our next slot. Quirky 1980 says, fair dues to Derek Ling. He seems to have put Kilkenny in position to compete without depending on TJ, something that Cody failed to transition to in the past 3 years. I mean, you do have one of the best hurlers in the country who is in absolute peak condition. Would you not think this is an important thing to use? But obviously he's been unavailable to Ling so far, so we'll see. Ball in behind on a 5-side Astro. Is that even a thing, says Frank, who seems to be confusing Shane with Colm. Colm is the Astro player. Shane plays full 11 aside.
90 minutes. 11 aside, although I did 85 Ger and then came off to my, when you've scored the hat-trick and you come off to the round of applause,
you take your ball and go home and the game is actually over because there's only one ball.
Come on, take me off. I don't need to be here anymore.
There's a me in team, but there's no I in Shane Hannon. Right. There you go. Tommy Walsh's first time on OTB and not being the highlight of the show because that's undoubtedly Shane, says Ronan Gilson. And so everybody is trying to bribe you to win those tickets.
Well, Cian Rowe has said, listening from Dubai lads, Shane has, you might have read this one, Shane has the shape of Crouch and the touch of a curb, which has made me laugh.
I didn't.
You're not far wrong.
I didn't. So there you go. We're in Dubai, we're in Cape Town, we're in Melbourne, and we're in Bulgaria this morning. I don't know where in Bulgaria. We did the Rooney, we did the Lampard one. I did that one. Where's Mother Goose? Isn't he their go-to emergency man? Asks Spectre Court.
Avram Grant.
Avram's done.
Yeah, he's done. Where is he now?
There you go. Shane Hannon and Paul Smith are the modern day version of the Niall Quinn and Kevin Phillips strike partnership, says Cormac Musali.
That's a fact. I don't know who Cormac is, but that's not far off. But Paul is the smaller version. Sometimes I nod the ball down to him. Vice versa. He's a tricky player still. He's 41. Peter Pan we call him. So he's still young at heart. But it's not far off, I have to say. They really, really are leaning into the positivity this morning.
There you go. 8:57, time for to turn our attention to the Masters, which obviously gets underway tonight. Joe Molloy, good morning to you. How are you? Happy Christmas.
Morning. I just heard the phrase positivity this morning. I presume that's what the reason is.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely, yeah. John Duggan asked me the other day, what's your favourite part about the Masters? And I was like, I had to actually think. It's a really good question. What is your favourite bit about this?
I don't know. I like it all. I mean, I do. I'm a sucker for the vicarious living through the traditions in the build-up. I ache for them. I'd love to do that, to live that life. I suppose I do love the golf course. If I was to boil it down to a single thing, first major of the year, everybody there, but like the intricacy of the golf course. I watch a lot of golf on the PGA Tour, and a lot of the courses are very boring. And the shots that they are required to hit are very boring, whereas there's like a rich tapestry of what they're being asked to do here. So if you're into your golf, and we're a great golfing country with lots of brilliant golfers, the things they're asked to do get me a little bit excited, whereas I can kind of sit there a bit slumped watching PGA Tour events far too often,
I think one of the things about that is that we've seen so many great winners of the tournament struggle across the course of the week and come up with something memorable from a position of difficulty. Maybe that's to do with familiarity, that this is one of the few tournaments where we actually get the same course year in, year out, and we're intimately familiar now with almost every aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that adds to the richness. They get to 12, you got a million things gone through your mind as a player and as a fan. Every time Spieth gets there, I think he has like post-traumatic stress. And even in 19 where Tiger won it, I think 3 went into the water. Koepka and Molinari certainly. So yeah, that all adds and it's just so beautiful. You know, it mightn't be the most admirable golf club in many ways, but the course is kind of incredible. So all of those things, the weight of history, I really love it. But this is all set up to be potentially absolute classic, unless the weather causes havoc, which I think it's going to.
You nearly need to be on autopilot, Joe, don't you, in that final back nine on the Sunday, because Vincent Hogan's even writing in the Irish Independent this morning talking about that Bryson DeChambeau episode of Full Swing, where he's sitting there after the first round last year. I think he shot a 73 maybe. He was out of contention, and then he looks at someone like Scotty Scheffler, who appears to not think of anything when he's playing golf.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, if you can keep the nerves at bay, that autopilot's very good to have. But to Ger's question as well, the course, we had Padraig Carrington on Golf Weekly, and I said, do you rate this in an architectural way? Is this the best there is? And he said, I would class this as intimidating. And Faldo was talking this week as well, and he was saying, to your autopilot point, you can't switch off on any shot here. I mean, the second you kind of think, I'm going okay here, I got a feel for this place and how to play this, it just gets you. You know, there's constant, you got the balls above your feet and you need to hit a fade, and you got a number and you have to hit it. And if you're 2 yards off, you're rolling off the green, and suddenly it's a double bogey and you're thinking, I didn't do it. What did I do wrong there? I hit a pretty good shot. So it is, I think it's such a great course because there is a genuine birdie double bogey opportunity on pretty much every hole. So all of that makes it really compelling again. And so the autopilot thing for sure, in terms of your nerves, and Scheffler's really interesting case in that point, because Sunday last year, he was in tears, literally cradled by his wife in tears, saying, I can't win the Masters. I shouldn't be here. This is insane. And then unflappable on the course.
That's pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. He's, what was it Liam Payne said about Will Smith? One of the world's great emoters. Yeah. One of the world's great. Scotty Scheffler's not one of the world's great emoters. So he doesn't grab anyone. He just doesn't. And he plays a very conservative brand of golf as well. And everything is just kind of solid. And yet some of his parts, he's so good at the moment. So he's if you compare him to Rory, he is the opposite in every way. I'm trying to do the maths. I think he's made the guts of 40 million in the last 2 years. You know, he just can't stop winning. He is still driving a 2012 GMC Yukon that his dad gave him. He's very much a man of God, Christian, and so believes it's all in God's hands. And I'm not saying he's doing that cynically to help his golf, but it does help his golf. So he has this veneer, as sports people down the years, it's a very common thing.
We were talking
he has this veneer of it's all in God's hands, and incredibly stable family.
Easter Sunday, it's really important this week. It's an extra. It's just this, as you say. It's
destiny.
It's kind of a bulletproof sense.
It is bulletproof. It is bulletproof. And I see it with Katie Taylor sometimes. I would think her opponent walking out just seeing this veneer of, I'm in God's hands, is an extra layer that makes them it gives a touch of aura. He's had the same coach since he was 12. On Full Swing, the most controversial thing he said, being mic'd up for a whole year, was that, Meredith, she eats crisps in bed sometimes. So annoying to his caddy on the course. Wonderful family. So, there's nothing to dislike. There's nothing to reach out and make you, I think, go, wow, this is this is the golf I want to see. But he's scary good. Last defending champion to win was Woods in 2002. And only 3 have done it. Jack in 66, Faldo in 90, Woods in 2002. Even Scotty Scheffler, remember Woods famously chipped in the Nike ball hovered in 2005? And that was the first time Woods had chipped in that entire year. Scotty Scheffler has chipped in 11 times this year. So, but even it doesn't really register because he chips in and he kind of goes,
hey.
Yeah, nice. It's all nice. So that makes him scary. He's really, really good.
We do love talking about the weather in Ireland, so this could actually be the perfect Masters for us, because it looks like it may be so bad that we might be seeing golf on Monday/Tuesday.
I know. And you boys off on Monday morning, huh?
Perfect, isn't it?
So today is going to be okay. Friday and Saturday going to be a mess. They're saying 10 to 12 degrees Celsius, which again by our standards isn't so bad, but that's cold by their standards. And I'm sure Tiger Woods' back is aching at the thought. And more to the point, thunder, which means delays. And that just brings in all sorts of unpredictability. And you know, if you're Rory and you're in a state of flow, which he can get into, he's going to, you know, that will affect certain players like him, I think, more so. Like the point is made routinely, there's a wet course and that will bring in the bombers and that will eliminate the short hitters. And yet I just have this nagging thought that the last time we had weather akin to this was in 2007 when Zach Johnson won, a short hitter, and in 2003 when Mike Weir won, a short hitter. So it just brings in qualities like resolve and patience and dealing with inevitable adversity. And it just you know, I watched Paul McGinley last night on NBC, and he was saying, I now have real, not doubts over Rory, but it's not what he wanted to see. So bad weather, who knows?
Yeah, that doesn't help. And he has been feeling himself recently, Rory. Like a lot of talk was around that 375-yard drive in Texas a couple of weeks ago, and rightly so, to within 3 feet. But even his press conferences in advance, like talking about visualising Scotty Scheffler handing him the green jacket in Butler's cabin, like, it's talk that we expect Roy to be cocky, but he seems to be really in a good place emotionally.
Yeah, I agree. That's Bob Rotella. Bob Rotella, interestingly, has flown in. He's on site with Rory all week, which is so interesting. So interesting. Because Rory, you know, he has flitted from one psychological approach to another when it comes to this tournament without amazing success, because he's blown himself out of this tournament the last 4 opening rounds. You know, if you're outside the top 10 after round 1, it's not good. Only once in the last 12 years, if you're outside the top 10 after round 1, has somebody won. So it's really not easy. Rory's often been 30th or worse. So Rotella has flown in. He's on site with them. And I would say, to your point, Shane, he just strikes me as like very seasoned now. You know, he got the grey hairs. You know, he should have won this thing 12 years ago. So he knows this course better than any, like you were talking about Scheffler, Scarry and Rahm and these guys. Nobody knows this course of the contenders better than Rory. Nobody has more experience. But, you know, he's gone from the golf doesn't define me and my family does to now, I think, accepting that didn't work for him on the course. You know, he'd be saying these things and he'd get on the course and suddenly golf did define him and he did get nervous. So visualization, I hadn't heard that quote, but that has Rotella written all over it. Rotella is, you know, I've read all his books in vain, but it's annoyingly simple, and it's lots of dream big, embrace it, and then one shot at a time. That's about the height of what he's saying. So, you know, I wouldn't say Joe Brawley would have a field day with him. I'd say I wouldn't say he's cocky, but I think he's had 8, you know, post that Ryder Cup where he was in tears, where I think he just thought, oh my God, I'm actually making a mess of this whole thing. And he has sorted out his game. I think genuinely the confidence has come from how reliable his game now is. His game is so reliable. He's even had an iffy year this year in comparison to last year, and he's won once. And his last 3 events, he's finished 3rd and 2nd. And it's kind of been like changing putter, changing driver, you know, just reassessing things. So it's kind of the first Masters where I'd almost stake my life he's going to be thereabouts if he doesn't have a bad first round.
Right. We've only got a minute left.
Sure.
There's no way that we can do the whole live thing properly in that. But do you expect the live crew to contend?
Yes, I do. Yeah. Everyone's saying, nah. Didn't stop Patrick Reed against Rory. I just, like 54 holes, I think they'll manage 72.
It doesn't seem to be that big a deal, does it?
I think a lot of nonsense has been talked there. Plus, you're now injecting these guys with more adrenaline than they've had all year.
Yeah.
And they got a point to prove. So, I think it's going to be classic. And, you know, one last quick point. The extent to which McIlroy, Trevor Immelman was talking, and he was saying, I've never seen this before. I've never seen an international player break America this way. He is the biggest story. Like, Tiger's not been mentioned the way he usually is. Every podcast, every American golf talk show, they're all starting with Rory. And Immelman was saying, it's really hard to do that as a non-American. But, like, he has never been more popular. He's the biggest name in golf. All the talk is Grand Slam, and you know that is a lot of weight when he tees it up at 6:48 this evening Irish time. So get through the first round, and then we could be in for something.
All right, every shot obviously available to watch as well, no doubt. Or is it?
Yeah, flick on. If you miss any of it, flick on your app. Just go into whatever player you want to see, hit play, and in 2 minutes you'll have their entire round. I mean, it's the future.
Right here today, Joe. Good stuff. Thanks a million.
Okay, fellas.
Enjoy.
See ya.
That's
Bye-bye.
Joe Molloy. You can get more of that goodness, of course, on Golf Weekly, and of course every weekday evening from 7 o'clock and Off the Ball on News Talk. Hat-trick. Steve Lane has been in touch to say Hat-trick Productions were behind Father Ted, whose theme tune was written by Neil Hannon, and now Shane Hannon has his own Hat-trick production, the Hannon Hat-trick Trifecta.
That's interesting. And one time in the 2011 season, when Monaghan FC won the Ulster Junior Cup, I was only a kid, scored 3 hat-tricks in 3 games in a row, it's still my crowning achievement. I'm not bragging about it, but I'm not bragging about it.
You are a bit, but that's
a little bit. So it was 9 goals in 3 games, which I was delighted with. So that makes sense. Yeah, Father Ted Production Company. There you go.
Spectre Course says, feeling himself, mark it off your OTB bingo card, lads. If you want to give us an example of the other things that are on your OTB bingo card there, Spectre
Grim,
Course,
apparently I say grim quite often.
we could get one printed for you and we could distribute them if you wanted.
Yeah.
Hate to be so cliched about the whole thing, but cliches are only cliches because they're true. Spectre Corp. You know that. We haven't run the competition courtesy of LeinsterRugby.ie, which is where you need to go if you want to get tickets for Leinster against Leicester at the Aviva tomorrow. And we're giving it away for the best comment of the day. Now, if you win this, you have to immediately DM us on our main Twitter account, which is @OffTheBall. I don't care if you don't have a Twitter account, just set one up for this, for the sole purposes of this, and slide into our DMs, and we will email you the tickets immediately, so that there is no, you have to come to the office to pick up the tickets. You don't. We're just miracle of modern, as we said. It's the new modern world. But Shane has to pick a winner, and he's going to have to pick a winner with a human name. I don't know. I mean, or unless you're a regular and we know you are a human being. Yeah. So don't worry, Spectre Court. You were in the running, but I don't even know if you live in Dublin. So, or if you want to go.
Picking the winner now? Is this what we're doing? Go for it. See, there's a lot of geographical ones. In fact, JP Purcell says, listening from Boracay Island, Philippines, lads.
Oh, wow.
Avid listener, love the show.
Wow.
I didn't even know that was a place.
That is as exotic as we have got.
Yeah, so look, the geographical ones are brilliant, but the problem is those people aren't going to fly home.
Can you make it to the Aviva on Friday night?
Yeah, that's the problem. I'm going to go with Michael. So Michael has given me a lovely visual, but he's also picked out a couple of things from this morning's show, so he's very observant. Michael says John Maughan and Tommy Walsh would make a great door staff partnership for Coppers. Tommy is nice, welcoming fella, has the chats to gauge how locked you are, while Maughan hangs a bit behind with a steely glare. It's a nice image. 2 lads at the door.
That's your winning.
That's the winning one, Michael. Well done. You're going to Leinster versus Leicester on Friday night.
Michael who?
Just Michael.
All right. Okay.
I'm sure he has a second name as well, though.
Give us your surname there, Michael.
Yeah, we'll get in touch.
Right, here's some highlights for you on the OTB Podcast Network. Football Daily, which is daily football news from Phil Egan. Wednesday Night Rugby, of course, from just last night, which was Rory O'Connor and Keith Wood. And Gavin Casey talking about the Katie Taylor fight as well. You can follow OTB across social and subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network. During the ads, our latest episode of Koi Gig, where Kathleen Carron and Emma's Carol Anburn discussed Katie McCabe's injury from last week in the Champions League. The Koi Gig Pod on OTB is in association with Cadbury FC, official snack partner to the Republic of Ireland women's national team. We're back after this with the former Ireland Rugby international, David Irwin.
You're listening
to OTB AM. OTB GAA.
I don't enjoy the game as much as I used to. Hurling, yeah, I don't enjoy it. It just seems to be a lot easier. The chaos is gone. That just complete tension, I think, has gone a little bit out of the game. And goals mean less than they did. And for me, if you scored a goal in the All-Ireland final in the 80s, 90s, that was generally the winning of the game.
Subscribe to the OTB GAA podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts.
Like, we've raved about McCabe, but is she like playing in the best form of her life at the moment? Like, she's just the last 3-4 games.
She's a little animal.
Unbelievable.
Do you know when she got that yellow card yesterday? I was sitting there, I was like, oh God, geez, she's going to get sent off. I'm going to have to talk to her during the week about all these yellow cards. And she's still mouthing off at the ref. I was like, oh no, this is not good. But then when it went into the second half, I was like, that's exactly what Arsenal needed. If they didn't have that little
grit,
I'm not going to say what she is, but if they didn't have her on the pitch, they would have flaked because they were flaking. And it just seemed to be that little bite in her, the kicking out, the moaning at the ref. I'm not saying to do that, but I'm just saying, like, it kind of did drag them along, as you say, Emma. It did, definitely, absolutely.
I'd prefer if she was getting her yellows for tackles, though, because they're going to they catch up on you eventually. Like, obviously, it's okay she's missing the Everton game. Probably. Should be okay. But
maybe it's tactical.
Yeah, not in the
Everton game.
Judging by Idaville's face, I don't think it was.
Definitely not in the 9th minute in a game like that. But when you're up against Chloe Kelly. But yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Well, I wouldn't take it away from her game, but there's a better way to get those yellow cards, I think.
Just trying to wind her team up. And there's nothing worse if you feel like your team is, you know, being a bit weak and not in it and not at the races like it does. You end up, I mean, I've got all my yellow cards were for mouthing off, to be honest.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Okay, we're turning our attention back to rugby, and I'm delighted to say our final guest on the show this morning is David Irwin, former Ireland and Lion Rugby International. David, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, not too bad, lads.
Your name came back into the public's consciousness as the Six Nations campaign rolled on, and the players began to just speak about the fact that yourself and Brian O'Driscoll and Craig Doyle were in talking, and Paul Rouse were in talking about Ireland's call and how the team is a very unusual thing in Irish cultural life. Can I spool you back to the bit where you got invited in? How did that come about?
Well, initially it actually occurred about 18 months ago, nearly 2 years ago. I think Andy Farrell had watched Craig and Brian's documentary Shoulder to Shoulder and thought that it really hit a note in terms of getting the guys to think about Ireland's call in particular and what players over the years had gone through to play for Ireland, particularly during the troubles up north. So Andy Farrell was very keen. In fact, he got the whole team to watch it about maybe 18 months ago, and then there was a couple of dates set to actually have that meeting, and then because of COVID it was postponed several times, maybe fortunately in the end, because ultimately it was we had it the Monday leading into the French game. So it was sort of Andy Farrell's idea, I think, initially, and say I was delighted to go in with Brian and Craig and Paul, obviously, and sort of discuss the documentary and some of the topics around it.
Did you have a plan about what you were going to say? Because 18 months of stewing on, actually, I need to say something that's going to be interesting here to a bunch of a different generation, and also I need to make sure that I catch the note right, particularly the week of a game against France.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't really have any preparation for it. I mean, I just sort of spoke from within, from the heart, so to speak. I was slightly worried because I knew Paul Rouse was speaking first, and he's obviously a professor of Irish history at UCD, and I thought, jeepers, my Irish history is maybe not particularly strong because we don't get taught Irish history up here, or certainly I didn't. So I actually got a few books out and read a bit, but I was relieved when we arrived at the meeting that Brian O'Driscoll was equally as nervous about any Irish history because he didn't seem to know much about it either. But I mean, it wasn't that type of talk. It was more of the history of Irish rugby that Paul was sort of reflecting on, and particularly the fact that, in partition 100 years ago, rugby was one of the sports that stuck to an all-Ireland sort of basis in terms of the team. It didn't split into north and south and so on. So when Paul gave a bit of that sort of background history, and so I sort of got off scot-free in terms of any other Irish history.
I'm sure the talk, David, had a significant impact for the players not born maybe within Ireland who weren't aware of some of the history, the likes of Bundy Aki and Mac Hansen and Rob Herring. James, the likes of
sort of what you might call the overseas players that play in the Irish team, I think it probably meant less to them, although I think they were still very intrigued and interested to listen to what we were saying, but also what some of his fellow players were saying. I mean, Johnny Sexton and James Ryan in particular were quite involved in the discussion, and I think, most of the players in the room were sort of similar age to my kids, and gladly my kids and obviously the players in the room didn't know an awful lot about the Troubles because it wasn't a particularly pleasant time to be living through. So they got a bit of an idea, obviously, from watching the documentary, but clearly, I suppose I gave them a wee bit more insight into what it was like playing rugby for both Ulster and Ireland at that time.
It's funny because some of the players, I mean, all of the players sing Ireland's call every week, but before a game, but they probably didn't realise the background to it, and when it was brought in '95, that it was brought in for a reason, to be more inclusive. So I'm sure that was something that a lot of players picked up on as well.
I mean, I think probably initially some of the players within the Irish setup sort of felt that the shoulder to shoulder was a bit intrusive on their own sort of national anthem as such. But if you actually take time to sort of listen to the words and sort of think about it, it obviously makes a lot more sense. And clearly it is very inclusive. I mean, you know, a lot of the words in it are, although people just sing them and enjoy the crack of the song, I mean, you know, together standing tall and shoulder to shoulder in the four proud provinces of Ireland, you know, it is quite powerful in terms of motivation and making you realise, you know, sort of, I suppose, where we've all come from, and we're all working together, and we're much more powerful and much more strong working together. And obviously in the context of the talk we did, obviously a bit more insight into what, say, players in the past, not just me, but quite a lot of different people have had to go through in terms of even just training for Ireland or representing Ireland, and some of the risks that people had to take, particularly some guys that maybe were in the security forces at the time and so on.
It's obviously such a long and important section of Irish rugby life. There was another documentary on after the England game about when England did come over, I think it was 72, and the Troubles were at their absolute height. And, you know, the English Rugby Union, they showed up, the Welsh and the Scottish didn't come for that game. And I think maybe sometimes we forget that when the rivalry is as intense as it is. I guess that was the 70s. Your part of the story is actually the 1980s and the build-up to the World Cup in 1987, which is supposed to be this global outpouring of rugby crossing into the mainstream for the first time that the whole world comes together. And I think people are generally familiar with your story, but I'd say that a lot of people are still discovering it for the first time. Did you talk in detail about what actually happened in 1987 to the team?
Yeah, talked a bit about it. I mean, Craig had a few clips off the documentary, one of which was obviously the bomb event at Colm at the border. But probably majority of them didn't really know much detail about what had actually happened. I mean, clearly it's the sort of thing that you could spend a long time talking about. But yeah, I did go into a bit of detail about, as you say, it was the first Rugby World Cup, very exciting time, as it would be in any sport, in a sort of a World Cup type competition. And obviously myself, Nigel Carr and Philip Rainey were driving down for a training session about a month before the World Cup. And unfortunately at the border, which doesn't really, the road that the bomb was on was the old road, so you don't actually drive past it now when you're going north to south, generally in the motorway. But clearly we were caught up in the IRA placed a car bomb at the side of the road, and just as their so-called target, Judge Gibson and his wife, were passing this car, we happened to be passing, going in the opposite direction, and clearly get caught up in the bomb explosion. And miraculously, none of us were killed. And even myself, which I was closest to the bomb because it was on my side, I think the hair in my head was singed badly, the hair in my right arm was singed, and I had a scrape in my nose. And that was it. Nigel Carr, unfortunately, had a lot more serious injuries. He was in the passenger seat beside me, and he had broken ribs, broken ankle, ruptured spleen, various, quite a list of injuries, which unfortunately in the end kept him out of the World Cup, and he missed it. Philip Rainey was essentially okay as well, but went to the World Cup. So it was a fairly traumatic incident, clearly for us. I think it suddenly opened the eyes of a lot of the guys in the squad generally, particularly the guys down south, because as I explained to the Irish team, pre-France game, I said, look, it's a wee bit at the moment like us watching all the stuff on the TV about Ukraine. You sort of look at it and you say, oh, that's terrible. Oh, God help them, blah, blah, blah. And back in the days of the Troubles, I'm sure probably that's when people in the UK, people down south thought as well. They saw it on the news every night, unfortunately, and they thought that's terrible. But they didn't really know, what it was like or what effects it could have on people. So it was certainly an eye-opener, I think, for a lot of them. And I was sort of pleasantly surprised that they took so much out of it, and it really seemed to affect them. And I was certainly quite relieved on the Saturday down at the French game to see them. Clearly, people have remarked about Johnny getting very emotional in the shoulder to shoulder. But I think the whole team were, and I think hopefully they can keep that going and take it on into the Rugby World Cup this year, and hopefully it'll pay dividends.
David, I think I've heard you describe before that moment of the explosion as being like 100 flash bulbs or light bulbs going off at once. And you mentioned Maurice Gibson, the senior judge, and his wife, both of whom were killed sadly in this £500 bomb. Like, were you aware immediately how serious this explosion was?
I think in an unusual way, sometimes you always imagine certain situations in life that you obviously hope that you'll never be in. For example, being on a bomb. For example, falling out of a plane. What would it be like as you fall out of the, that type of thing? Sounds a bit odd, but so although I had heard lots of bombs going off around Belfast, and particularly the school I went to, Belfast Inns, which is right in the middle of the city centre. I mean, during the Troubles, there was bombs going off nearly every day. Some pretty close to the school, so the sound of a bomb going off I was quite familiar with, and when it happened to us, I say clearly it just comes out of the blue. Obviously you're not expecting it, so as you described, it was huge amount of white light, enormous noise, and in that split second, time, as people always say, seemed to slow down, and I remember thinking, there's a bomb under my car. Why has my car been blown up? I don't understand this. Clearly, I wasn't aware. As you're driving along, I probably wasn't really that aware of the car coming towards me, and I certainly wasn't aware of the car parked at the side of the road. We were just chatting about the World Cup that was coming up later that month. So it all happened clearly, as you would expect, very quickly, and within what was probably a second or two, my car had literally stopped, still facing the same way, still in the same lane, as if I'd literally done an emergency stop. And it was only then that I sort of realised, when I looked to my right, I saw a huge crater in the road, and when I looked to my left, I saw obviously Nigel injured beside me, sort of semi-conscious, and through his window I saw the other car, which was basically an inferno of flame internally, and two vague shadows in the front seat, which I initially thought was a police car. Clearly, I sort of checked myself over to make sure I wasn't missing any limbs or any significant injuries. So it all basically happened very quickly, and then after that, there was general chaos at the scene, because obviously cars in front and behind both myself and the judge's car were sort of had veered off the road. I think there was 3 or 4 nurses from the south of Ireland who were travelling north, ironically for the first time, to some nurses' awards dinner, and they had veered off the road, and they were sort of running around screaming, and it was just chaos at that point. But I suppose maybe with my medical background, I don't know, I just got into sort of I suppose safety mode and started to proceed to try and get Nigel out of the car and Philip out of the car, and I directed a lorry to go up the road to inform the police and blah blah blah. I didn't realise at that time that the Garda Síochána had escorted Judge Gibson to about 100 yards short of where the bomb was, and the RUC were 100 yards up the road waiting to escort him the rest of the way. So they were actually already there, but observing from a distance, because clearly, as you may recall, in those days, a second bomb frequently could have been set to sort of booby trap any of the security forces. So I'd say it was a bit surreal and chaotic, certainly for at least 10 or 15 minutes straight afterwards.
When do you come back to yourself and kind of start to realise that you've been through the experience where the immediate kind of medical training passes and you're like, okay, kind of need to start dealing with what's happened?
Yeah, good question. I mean, obviously there was probably a good hour or so after the bomb where Nigel and Philip went off to Daisy Hill Hospital. I tried to sort my car out. I spoke to a few people. I rang my mom. I rang Wonders Rugby Club in Dublin to let them know clearly we wouldn't be there for training. Trevor England, Hugo McNeil and Sid Miller were actually about maybe 5 minutes behind us en route south. And they were diverted around, not past the actual incident, but they were, like all the traffic, they were diverted through the countryside around the incident. They didn't know at that point that it was obviously us. So clearly, as I say, we weren't going to training. I rang my brother Alan. He came down, picked me up. The car was obviously destroyed. I think that was either Saturday morning or Sunday morning. I can't remember. I think it was maybe Sunday morning. Monday morning, I was back in my GP trainee post as normal, doing my normal job, and just continued on in my normal way. And I think maybe 15 years later, 20 years later, I was out in the town in Dublin with Rob Jones and Dean Richards, the English number 8, after I think it was the Peace International that Trevor and Hugo McNeil had organised, and we were out that night. They asked me something about it, and it sort of just hit me then. So every now and again, it would just come to the surface. But generally, I think I just look at it that we were very fortunate. Obviously unfortunate to be in it in the first place, but fortunate to have come through it the way we did. And as I say, obviously that's why Brian wanted to take me back down to Colleen for the documentary, which is where we filmed the scene literally where the bomb had been. So I think I've dealt with it okay, but sometimes you just have to get on and hope that things sort themselves out. I do. I'm very interested in your perspective on this, because I often wonder about the shared trauma and the ability for us now to process it, and maybe in the processing of it we find some way to all be a little bit closer in our understanding of the possibilities for us as a country, as people who share the island. Yeah, I mean, I think an incident like that certainly opens up lots of doors of thought within your own head and other people's heads, and sometimes hopefully a lot of people change their opinions then and sort of think, oh, that's terrible, that shouldn't happen, we need to do whatever we can to make sure it doesn't happen again, and so on. I mean, I think at the time, obviously, probably more so sort of 70s, early 80s at the time, obviously there was lots of incidents in the north, and I was one of many, we were one of many. But I think, it was incidents like that and all the others that, ultimately led to, I suppose, people saying, like, we're fed up with this, something needs to be done. Obviously, the Anglo-Irish Agreement sort of came in towards the end of the 90s eventually, and so on. And obviously since then, things have been relatively normal up here compared to what they were. So, as I say, I certainly found it therapeutic talking to the guys in Dublin. I think they equally found it fascinating and hopefully motivating and whatever else other phrases you want to use for them, even though, as I say, some of them were maybe not even born at that time or from further afield, like Dundee and Maughan and people like that. But it certainly made them think seriously about what it all meant in terms of them flipping jersey. I suppose that's why we're speaking to you as well, David, is that tomorrow's the 25 years since the Good Friday Agreement, and as you say, a lot of young people nowadays of a certain generation won't be familiar with the Troubles whatsoever. They just weren't alive to experience it. Is that one of the reasons why you feel open and I guess compelled to speak about your experience as well of that incident in 87? Because I guess that famous quote that's in Auschwitz as well, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it, and that's an important lesson for young people as well. Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for everybody nowadays, particularly people that didn't live through the Troubles, to be aware of what happened and probably to be more aware of, I suppose, why the Troubles happened. And as I said, when I heard I was doing the talk, I did do a bit more reading up, particularly about sort of Irish history. I mean, like the history of all countries, it's quite complicated, and the further back you go, the more complicated it gets. And you think, well, who came from where, and legitimately owns this or should live there, do that or whatever. But at the end of the day, no matter where you're from or what part of the world you're in, people have to live together. And I think there's more important things in the world at the moment in terms of keeping the world itself going rather than conflict within certain countries or certain parts of certain countries. As I keep talking about the movie Sliding Doors, particularly with regards to the incident at the border. A couple of traffic lights here and there, a couple of things here and there, and we may not have been in the bomb, but it turned out that just the way things worked out, we were. And as I say, it clearly changed not changed my perspective, because I've been sort of experiencing the troubles for a lot of years, but it certainly changed the perspective of a lot of people, particularly down south within that sort of rugby setup.
Yeah, I've no doubt. And I can only imagine how difficult it is sometimes to talk about this, and you've been really good with your time this morning, and it clearly had an impact on the players, and I think the fact that had such an impact is continuing to ripple out as the conversation, we learned a bit more about what happened. And I know a lot of people in the room were kind of saying it was just for the room, but then the players started to talk about it unprompted, and that has kind of fed into this conversation about Ireland's call and why we kind of need something to help us all bring it together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as I say at the beginning, there's probably a lot of people, particularly down south, and who had maybe certain different views, or thought, why was singing that song? That's just to appease the ones from the north type thing. But I think as time went on, and particularly more recently, people sort of suddenly realised that it is actually very inclusive and it is very representative of the whole island of Ireland and the 4 provinces. And as I say, if you look at the words, they are quite motivational. And fair play to Phil Coulter when he wrote it. I mean, even when you sort of think of the line, come the day and come the hour, that could be the World Cup final this year. It's sort of, you can really, I mean, obviously the Irish team are very, very well prepared in most ways. It's a fantastic team. And sometimes, these small motivational things, you just add that on the top of all their other preparation and so on, can make a difference, and hopefully it will down the line. And I think certainly this year, of all the years in the World Cup, Ireland, they've always gone into the World Cup with great hopes and tended to maybe fall a wee bit at not the first hurdle, but not progress as far as they should have. But I mean, clearly there's pressure on them this year to do well as #1 team in the world, which is incredible for a country this size. But I think it just shows you the power and the strength of the sort of feeling within Ireland, particularly in sport, not just rugby, Gaelic, hockey, soccer, boxing, you name it. I mean, we fight above our weight in a lot of things, particularly in sport. And hopefully, as I say, this year in the World Cup, they'll be able to get out of a very, very difficult group and progress on in the competition and ultimately bring back the Holy Grail, let's say.
Well, if that happens, you can definitely say that you played your bit, David. It's been fascinating listening to you. Thanks so much for being so generous with your time.
No worries.
It's David Irwin there, former Ireland and Lion, talking to us about talking to the team in the week of the France game. So, yeah.
They can definitely dip into the likes of that, can't they? Like maybe in September, or like they'll think back to the likes of those talks and take little bits from them. Because it's just an incredible story. And I know some people watching would have heard that story before, some won't. Because Nigel Carr, who was probably the most badly injured of the 3 lads, he was one of the best open sides in the world at the time. And didn't get to play in the World Cup later that year in '87. Of course, they were lucky to be alive at the end of it, but it's just an incredible story and probably highlights why we're talking about it as well. Good Friday Agreement, 25 years on. Such an important moment in this country's history. So, really inspiring individual, David Irwin.
This is our last OTB AM before next Tuesday. So join us next Tuesday for our Gillette Labs performance rankings. Sarah Donovan reviewing Kilkenny Limerick. Morris Brosnan talking about the weekend's football. We've got the Ireland Women's National Team games against America. One of them will be down in the books. There'll be Champions Cup, there'll be Premier League and Masters reaction, which may still be going on next Tuesday. We shall see, depending on the weather. Right now we're going to play out with Tim Vickery on last night's show with Joe Molloy. Happy Holy Thursday, if that's one of your things. Spy Wednesday. Ash, no, what? Is it? What, all the days have names, right?
Is Ash Wednesday a different day?
The Evangelists that was the name I was looking for, to put a tin hat on it, to say thanks very much, and a nice little bow. Happy Easter. Enjoy the chocolates.
There's no keeping a good man down. Tim Vickery, hello.
Been a long time, Joe Molloy. How have you been keeping?
Very well. Has been a long time. Maybe since World Cup, perhaps.
Perhaps, or the death of Pele. I had that run, in my life from the elections over here, the end of October, build up to the World Cup, which was the end of the Messi arc, if you like, and then the death of Pele. And it's hard to think of anything in football that could be bigger than that. And then we had our riots, the January the 8th riots, the far right going berserk. And it just felt huge story on top of huge story on top of huge story. It was a kind of no sleep till bedtime fronts. But I don't think I'll ever have things as big as that ever again. I've probably peaked, Joe Molloy. I'm on the downward slope now.
You and me both. And has the general temperature in Brazil post-January 8th cooled to something approaching normality?
Well, Bolsonaro is, as I speak, giving evidence to the federal police about a possible embezzlement corruption case. He arrived back in the country last week. He remains a polarising figure. Horrific news today from the south of Brazil. A madman with a machete in a creche, killing 4 children.
Oh my God.
And that could have been far, far worse. And I don't have all the details on that. I think it was 25 years old. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if there's a far right thing from that as well. And I may be stretching here, but Blumenau, Santa Catarina, the southern state, it is where some of these far right ideas have deepest roots. And there is amongst the far right a kind of anti-school thing. You know what I mean? Anti-school, and it's these lefty teachers filling them with nonsense, and they should be homeschooled. I don't know how much, if anything, that has to do with the lunacy of today, but the country has huge problems and huge possibilities. But the problems, I think, are bigger, and the problems transcend far right or anything else. So the big problem is, how on earth can you include the urban masses, millions and millions? How can you include them in some kind of modern economy? And Brazilian agro-business does very well, but it's an export industry that neither feeds the country nor creates a lot of great jobs. So that can't be the solution, although politically it's very powerful. And a lot of agro-business was Bolsonaro's chief backer. So that's a problem. And also, as you've seen, no doubt in Ireland, but around the rest of the world, you're trapped in that thing where the rents keep going up and wages don't. And it's just it's a calamity. It's a train wreck, because a few years ago, you always see homeless people. There are some people for whom reality, they can't hack it. It's difficult. Now you're seeing homeless families, and it's got nothing to do with drugs or personal problems. It's just they can't pay the rent. They are powerful forces that need to be stopped in our societies. Rentier capitalism. It's almost feudalism of how much can we extract, because while you're in a world when rents keep going up, property keeps going up, and wages stay the same, you are in a situation where more and more and more people are going to be made homeless. And somewhere like here, where you've got so many in precarious situation anyway, that's a disaster waiting to happen.
It's so interesting you say that. I don't know how closely you do follow the news here in Ireland. I wouldn't think overly closely, because why would you? But the housing crisis, as it's commonly referred to, is the big story of the last number of years, and only increasingly so. And just this week, and it's been brewing and much debated for several weeks now, there was an end to a ban on a moratorium on evictions, a ban on evictions. For constitutional reasons, the government argued it had to be lifted. And so there is great anticipation of a jump in numbers of homeless people. And as you well say, it's not down to drugs or an inability to function at a reasonable level. It is purely down to rising costs and wages not matching, and shortages for all sorts of reasons. And it's very grim. It's interesting that parallel's running in Brazil.
Yeah, and it can't go on. But onwards and upwards. Onwards we go.
I don't really know how to segue in any way neatly from that to matters which really aren't important, so I'm just going to do it clunkily. The reason
the way to do it, Joe, I think, is that we are going from the truly important things to the most important of the least important things.
Okay.
That's what we're doing.
Beautifully done. The Carlo Ancelotti links with the Brazilian job. So Ancelotti, 63 years of age now, he has publicly stated Brazil interested in hiring him, and he's interested in the gig. So he has stated his immediate focus is on Real Madrid, where he does have a contract until 2024. You say but?
Yeah, but that's it. He says, I'm going to respect my contract, which is till 2024. Now, Brazil are in a rush. World Cup qualification starts in September. So they need someone soon. Are Chelsea going to do them a favour? Because I was doing TV yesterday with a journo based in Madrid, and he says the only way that Ancelotti will definitely be there next year is if he wins the Champions League again, which is a possibility. You know, they're up against Chelsea and they're flying against Barcelona as we speak.
3-0.
The league looks beyond them, but the Champions League remains a possibility. If he wins that, well, maybe he stays. And he says he wants to stay until 2024. So we don't know what's going to happen with this.
He doesn't have some Jurgen Klopp-esque philosophical inclination to say out all contracts. I mean, Everton fans will promptly text in to say he dropped us like a hot potato. He couldn't get out of here soon enough. He travelled as quickly as he could, and has never thought of Liverpool again. So let's see what Ancelotti does. He'll suit himself, I'm sure. I'm curious as to the reaction in Brazil. Who was the last foreign manager to?
They've never had one.
Never.
This is for kind of one-off game, against the club side, but never. So really, never had one. The fella who was gonna coach '58, which was the first World Cup they won, it was the candidate of João Havelange, who was making his name at the time as the head of Brazil's FA. He wanted to put in a very successful local coach who was Paraguayan. That didn't happen. And after they won in '58, then the idea of having a foreign coach just became anathema. What we want one of them for? Yeah. We're world champions. So it's a historic moment. There is not one single strong Brazilian candidate. Now that tells you about a crisis in Brazilian coaching. There's no prejudice in Europe towards South American coaches. Lots of Argentines. Pellegrini from Chile, for crying out loud, has done some of the biggest clubs in the world. But Brazilians can't get in there. When they've got in there, they've done badly. The only Brazilian coach in kind of the group stage of the Champions League in recent years was Silvinho, who, very good assistant, probably not. We'll see if he becomes a top-level coach, but that didn't last very long. And they're also losing space at home. Around half the coaches in Brazil's first division now are foreign, with a lot of Portuguese, and the outstanding work is all being done in Brazil by foreign coaches. So there is no strong Brazilian candidate. Ancelotti fits the bill because it's a tough ask. Who accepts this? The players. The players don't have the least problem with this. They're globalized.
Yeah.
They already work under, in the case of Vinicius and Rodrigo and until recently Casemiro, they've already worked with foreign coaches. It's no problem for them. Younger generation have grown up with a globalised, they're playing FIFA manager or whatever. The older generation, and especially the coaching fraternity, just despise the idea. And you are walking into a trap, and they will be desperate for you to fail. It needs a diplomat. And Ancelotti is a great diplomat.
Yeah.
And he's so wonderfully laid back. Look at how the job has aged, the likes of Guardiola and Mourinho. Ancelotti doesn't age at all. He's just there with his cigar, and that low profile, consensual style of leadership is one. Some would argue that Brazil needs something more radical. That is one possible argument. But just to slip in there and not create conflict, Ancelotti is perfect in that one. But is he free? And if he isn't, can you attract? And Brazil is one of those few places where the leading Brazilian coaches, they want the national team. Whereas elsewhere, the national team has become either veterans or rookies. Now, look at England. Roy Hodgson, that kind of one of into his career, and Gareth Southgate towards the other. And that's kind of the way it's been, because the big coaches, they want to be in the Champions League. But for Brazil, it's still seen as the best, the biggest thing that you can possibly do as a coach. It's a hugely important national symbol. So I don't envy, however much they're going to get paid, if it's Ancelotti or whoever it is, I don't envy them, because they're going to be sitting in a little bit of a coconut shy, I think.
Some of the former players have voiced opposition. Rivaldo, it shows a lack of respect to Brazilian coaches to consider hiring
far-right nationalist.
Is he? God.
Yeah, very, very much a far-right nationalist. And he waited until Germany had been eliminated from the World Cup in the group phase 5 years ago now in Russia, and he said, "Oh yeah, these are the people that we're supposed to be copying, imitating." Okay. Didn't say anything after the 7-1, so
Okay.
I take what he says with a pinch of the old proverbials.
Because he did conclude by saying the team has to be managed by someone who has Brazilian blood running through their veins, which was suitably. Cafu said, "Are you going to jump in again here and destroy Cafu on me as well?"
Okay. No, not at all. No.
He said, "Why not give a chance to a young Brazilian coach? We have 4 years to form a team. Give the squad to a young coach, give him the tranquility, and I'm sure Brazil will put together a great team." He didn't care to name names, which maybe illustrates your point that there isn't a standout candidate.
Yeah, I mean, there's one, Fernando Diniz, who's not that young anymore, but he's interesting. He's very of Fluminense at the moment. He's a standout, and he's failed in a lot of places. But because it's attractive what he serves up, he gets other chances.
Okay.
Which is rare in coaching, and he's done very, very well with Fluminense. They're kind of anarchic. They're fun to watch. It's possession based, but it's without the set positions, if you like, of a kind of Guardiola. It's much more anarchic than that, which means that they can see goals, but it's fun. And they've just signed Marcelo of Real Madrid for so many years. He hasn't made his debut yet, but quite how he's going to fit into the mix, I don't really know. It's hard to see him as a left back in such an anarchic side. So he would be one very interesting candidate. And, well, Scaloni did all right for Argentina, didn't he? Yeah. He was a man with no previous senior coaching experience, although Scaloni did have 15 years experience of top-level dressing room football in Europe. And it's really striking, actually, how many... if you look at, say, our Champions League, the Libertadores has just kicked off.
Yes.
Look at the coaches of the Argentine sides. River Plate, De Michelis. Once of Bayern and Man City. Boca have just sacked, but until last week it was Hugo Ibarra of Monaco and Porto. Racing is Fernando Gago, only recently retired. Played for Real and Roma. Argentinos Junior sits Gabriel Milito, who played Barcelona and Zaragoza and so on. You don't quite see that from the big names in Brazilian football. It's like the Argentines, I think they're doing their badges earlier while they're still playing. You don't see that many. Part of the reason for that is it's such a hard position in Brazilian football. It's difficult to be a coach in Brazil. That's one of the reasons there's this crisis in coaching. The calendar is the size of the country. It's a huge country, so there's a lot of travelling. There's too many games. There's no time on a training field, and you're not allowed to lose. That little mix has made for cautious coaches. South Africa a few years ago, they went down the Brazilian road when they hosted the World Cup. They ain't doing that no more. They ended up because they had this image of the Brazilian coach being lyrical, and that's not what they got at all. They got organised and pragmatic. But in order to survive in Brazil as a coach, that's what most of them have done.
In some respects, you can really see Ancelotti working. He will go in, as you said, he won't take criticism personally. He will charm everyone. He'll raise an eyebrow. He'll take the mania of Brazil and their national football team on his shoulders. And, I mean, he's done an extraordinary job with Real Madrid again in many ways. So it kind of all makes sense. He's at a nice age for it. On the Copa Libertadores, the South American version of the Champions League, I was reading your piece as it gets underway now. And I suppose if people wanted a headline theme, it's your point that the last three finals have been all Brazilian affairs. There is a level of Brazilian dominance here, and the best that Argentina, Colombia, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Uruguay, Venezuela, you name it, can muster, isn't really competing with what Brazil are throwing out there.
No, the big Brazilian clubs have much more money, and they're going to have more money still. That's the way things are going here. They've also got much cuter in scouting the rest of South America. So they're cherry picking from the rest of South America. So the big Brazilians can bring back South Americans from Europe, veterans, even like Arturo Vidal from Chile and Luis Suarez from Uruguay. They can bring them back. They can bring back players who've gone to Europe and haven't come off, mid-20s players who are still very, very good players. And they can cherry pick from the rest of South America. And there's another factor in there, which has been the rise of Major League Soccer. Because Major League Soccer is reluctant to buy big-name Brazilians because you have to pay so much more for them. But cherry picks from a lot of the rest of the continent. So what we're seeing is the Brazilian clubs get stronger and the competition get weaker. River Plate have... I talk far too much. And in the end, it wins out over the vocal cords.
You're okay. Tim Vickery listeners having a drink of water, a well-earned drink of water.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Nothing stronger. And so it's hard to see how the rest of the continent can compete. River Plate have tried to compete now by extending their stadium. They have the biggest stadium in South America now. They took out the running track. There's a plan for Boca to do something similar and go even bigger. So that's one way of competing. Get more revenue in from having more fans packed in. But apart from that, I'm quite pessimistic about the future of the Libertadores. And one possible salvation is Pan American. It's putting the big teams from the States and Mexico in the mix. This starts timidly next year with a tournament for the two finalists of the Libertadores and the two finalists from the CONCACAF Champions League. The logistics here are horrific. The Americas are absolutely huge, and the distance between Buenos Aires and Mexico City is further than that between London and a number of cities in India. And you think about going beyond that up to Seattle or something. You know, these are Vancouver. These are massive journeys. So I think initially it has to be done on a tournament basis. But that looks to me potentially interesting because the synergies are obvious. South American football has so much credibility. Major League Soccer, it doesn't have credibility, but it does have a kind of momentum behind it. So you put it together, and I wonder in the future if there's just a possibility of a kind of alternate pole to the dominance of European club football.
Before you go, I wanted to get your perspective on Manchester United and Brazil's Antony. So he pitched up for €95 million, not cheap, and he scored early on against Arsenal and did a prolonged dance in front of the camera, and everybody thought, ooh, right man, right stage, this could be very interesting. And since then, I don't know how many Manchester United games you've managed to see, Tim, but there's been a real flattering to deceive element to his performances. He doesn't look to have searing pace to go by players at Premier League level. He likes to cut in on his left foot. He will score 1 in 20 of those shots, and he scored 3 Premier League goals. In fairness, he scored a few in Europe, but 3 Premier League goals, no assists, and he has 16 caps for Brazil with 2 goals. For the €95 million, and I appreciate he's only 23 and he's pitched up in a new country and in a new team, so you have to be fair to him. But even talking to Pat Nevin the other evening, who's regularly on with us on a Monday, jury's out and like nearing conclusion that this looks ominous.
I feel a bit sorry for him with the fee, because the thing that dictated that was the amount that they played. United paid for Lisandro Martinez, the Argentine centre-back. They paid so much for him that they were going to have to pay more for a younger striker. Now, Ten Hag knows exactly what he's getting, and Ten Hag is very loyal to this player, perhaps over loyal. When he played here, he played for Sao Paulo. He used to drive me mad because left-footed right winger, he would slow down every counter-attack.
Yeah.
Because he would always do the same thing. Stop, cut in, give the defence time to get organised. Drove me mad. Just before the pandemic, we had the Olympic qualifiers over here. It's a big deal, the under-23 championship. And the coach loved him and kept on picking him. And it just wasn't working, and it drove me berserk. And in the end, Brazil's senior coaching staff stepped in. It was a vital game. They had to beat Argentina. And they said, have you thought about dropping him? And they ended up dropping him for the vital game against Argentina, and it worked much better without him. Following that, he goes to Ajax, which is a good place to go, I think, if you're a winger. It's a good finishing school. And talking to the coaching staff who took, just before the World Cup, who took Brazil to the World Cup, they were absolutely enchanted with him, and absolutely enchanted with what Ten Hag had done with him. That Ten Hag had really, really developed him. That he could his right foot was now, because that's one of the things you need. Ajax, you expect two-footed players. His right foot improved. He could go outside. He was much, much better at picking his options, and he would work back defensively and do much more. So I think he was like, Ten Hag could look at him and think, look at my boy. Look at my boy. Look what I've done with him. May mean
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
The Football Pod with Paddy Andrews and James O'Donoghue.
I heard through the grapevine that Paddy Andrews was happy enough that Sean O'Shea had put the ball in the net.
Was?
He did. He goes, leave him kick that. Leave him kick that.
I'll admit that. I was thinking, not within the conditions, the time of the game. He's nearly 60 metres out. And I'm just thinking that he's...